Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the clunky, sweat-soaked boots of a medieval plague doctor. You know the one. Bird mask, black robes, mysterious vibes. But this isn't a heroic rescue story. Nope. This is you, exhausted and terrified, marching down a narrow cobblestone alleyway while everyone either runs from you or thinks you are the plague. A child cries, a door slams, the air stinks of rot and smoke. Welcome to the worst job in Europe. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't go to medical school. That's your first clue. This gig isn't going to be a walk in the monastery garden. In fact, there is no medical school, not the kind you're thinking of. It's the 14th century, and if you're literate, male, and maybe dabbled in some anatomy scrolls between Bible studies, that's considered good enough. You might be a barber surgeon. You might be a failed apothecary. You might be a monk with too much time and an unhealthy interest in boils. The city doesn't care. They need someone, anyone, to stop the mass dying, and you're the poor soul who took the contract. Sure, technically, some real physicians exist. They're called physiti, or medici, wealthy, Latin-speaking, heavily robed gentlemen who are too important to touch an actual patient. Most of them won't go near plague victims because they're smart. You, on the other hand, are desperate for coin and maybe a sliver of glory. Historians still argue whether many of you were actually trained in medicine at all or just thrown into the fray because someone had to take notes on all the dying. The city council hands you the gig. It's all very official. You even get a scroll with your name written in careful ink. And a contract. You'll be paid a generous sum if you survive. The job sounds noble, honorable, essential. But you're basically medieval cannon fodder. They give you a stick, a long wooden cane. It's your best friend. You'll use it to lift blankets, point at buboes, knock on doors, and occasionally poke someone who's faking illness to avoid work. You also get access to records, keys to the infected quarters, and permission to dissect bodies. Though no one tells you how to do that. Your neighbors start avoiding you. You used to be part of the community. Now they cross themselves when you walk past. The market vendors stop offering you bread. Children run behind doorways when they see your shadow stretch across the wall. You're not just a man anymore. You're a symbol of death, of bad luck, of everything falling apart. At first, you try to explain you're here to help, that you want to stop the spread, that you're doing God's work. But people don't want to be helped. They want to not die. And your presence means someone probably already has. Still, you try to cling to some dignity. You carry little glass vials of cures in your satchel. Vinegars, oils, crushed rose petals, and maybe a little mercury. You offer prayers. Sometimes you scribble notes in the margins of an old herbal manuscript, pretending you're building a treatment guide for future generations. But deep down, you know the truth. You don't know what you're doing, and neither does anyone else. Doctors in this era still believe in humors. Black bile, yellow bile, flame, and blood. Everything from toothaches to fever is blamed on an imbalance. Plague? They say it's due to corrupted air, or perhaps the wrath of God, or bad planetary alignments. You aren't sure whether to burn herbs or confess your sins or both. So you do both. You're not here to cure. You're here to count, to track who's sick, who's dead, and who might be next. Sometimes you write names. Other times it's just tallies scratched into a plank with a bone nail. There's a strange sort of fame in all this. People whisper your name in taverns. "He's still alive," they say, almost with awe. You're treated like a cursed knight. Some even ask you to bless their homes. Others throw things at you when you get too close. One day, you're summoned to a manor. A nobleman's daughter has fallen ill, and the father has sent for you. You ride out because, yes, sometimes you're lucky enough to get a horse. At the door, the guards don't want to let you in. You're filthy. You smell. But you're the only option. Inside, the girl is burning with fever. Her eyes dart in all directions. Her hands clutch the sheets like they're holding her to earth. You check her pulse, something you learned from an old Greek translation, and whisper a prayer. The nobleman stands over you, watching, waiting. You offer a poultice, lavender, garlic, maybe a dash of opium if you're lucky. Nothing works. 3 days later, she's gone. You get paid anyway, a little extra even. And you realize, horrifyingly, that sometimes the job is just about being there to watch people die, so their family doesn't have to do it alone. Later, while eating a crust of bread in a cold storeroom behind the city gate, you open a letter from your cousin. He's a smith in another town. He writes, "Are you still doing that?" And you laugh. Not a happy laugh, more like a wheeze, because, yeah, you're still doing this, and there's no end in sight. One curious, rarely mentioned fact: some cities actually made you promise not to leave town for a year. You sign the contract knowing it could be your death sentence. If you try to run, they fine your family or throw you in jail. You are, in a very literal sense, trapped with the dying. Sometimes at night, you whisper to yourself, not prayers, not songs, just words, any words, to remind yourself you still exist. You once tried to record how many patients you saw in a day. You gave up after 37. Some were still breathing, some weren't. You can't keep up. Your handwriting turned to scrawls. Your notes stopped making sense. But you keep going, because if you don't, no one else will. And so, you trudge through another gray morning, your breath fogging inside your mask, your cane clicking against the stones, a shadowy ghost in the half-light. Because that's your job, not to heal, just to witness. The city gives you your uniform in a sack. You open it and immediately regret it. It smells like damp wool and vinegar-soaked leather left too long under a bed in summer. There it is, the infamous plague doctor outfit. And the worst part, you have to wear this everywhere. First, the robe. Heavy, waxed, and hot. It's black because that's what death looks like, apparently. The fabric is thick and stiff, meant to protect you from miasma, the bad air they think causes disease. It's also nearly impossible to move in. You feel like a sweaty scarecrow dragging a raincoat through mud. Then the gloves. Thick, cracked leather. They make it nearly impossible to feel anything, like a heartbeat, or the difference between a cold wrist and a dead one. Not that it matters much. By the time someone calls for you, it's usually too late anyway. Boots? Same story. Wooden soles. Loud. Slippery. Every alley becomes an obstacle course. You once slipped on a fish head in the street and landed in something you still hope was only horse dung. Now, the pièce de résistance, the mask. You pick it up with both hands. It's heavier than expected. Rigid leather, shaped like a bird's beak, long and curved. At the front, two round glass eye holes that fog up immediately. Inside the beak, you stuff it with herbs. Rosemary, lavender, cloves, and whatever else you can get your hands on. Some doctors use dried rose petals. One guy you met once used cinnamon and crushed juniper. Another swore by orange peel and dried toad skin. A third used straight-up turpentine. You don't ask questions anymore. The mask pinches your nose. It squeaks when you breathe, and it never stays in place. You tie the leather straps tightly around your head, but sweat makes everything slippery. You can't scratch your face. You can't wipe your brow. You can't eat unless you take the whole thing off. And you definitely can't sneeze. That actually happened once, mid-visit. You tried to hold it in. It came out anyway, explosively. Herbs went flying out the beak like a medieval party popper. The patient's grandmother screamed and hit you with a broom. You left early that day. Historians still argue whether this bird mask was widely used during the Black Death itself, mid-1300s, or if it came into fashion during later outbreaks, like the 1600s. Either way, you're stuck with it now. It's not just impractical, it's terrifying. People don't see a doctor, they see a walking omen. Children cry. Old women make the sign of the cross. Even the dying look frightened when you enter a room. You don't look like help. You look like the last thing they'll ever see. You once tried to reassure a patient by kneeling next to his bed and saying, "I'm here to help." He stared at your mask, wide-eyed, and whispered, "No, you're not. You're here to watch me die." Touché. Wearing the outfit also makes it hard to hear. The leather flaps rub against your ears. The mask echoes every breath like you're trapped inside a damp closet. You often miss what people are saying, especially behind closed doors. You nod a lot and hope they're not asking for something urgent. More than once, you've walked out of a home only to realize you left behind your satchel, or worse, your cane. Oh yes, the cane. Can't forget that. It's not just a pointer, it's your all-purpose tool. You poke things with it, blankets, bodies, doors. You use it to lift clothing and check for signs of plague. Black boils, bruised limbs, feverish tremors. You also use it to keep distance when patients start panicking. One guy swung at you with a candlestick. Another tried to hug you in gratitude, plague boils and all. The cane saved you more than once, but the suit isn't magical, far from it. The theory is that the herbs in the beak will purify the air before it enters your lungs. Because everyone knows plague comes from poisoned air, right? That's the miasma theory. Popular, widely accepted, and totally wrong. You know what actually carries the plague? Fleas, specifically fleas from infected rats. And those fleas are having a field day, burrowing under your heavy robes and snuggling into your damp socks. The suit doesn't stop them. In fact, it might attract them. It's warm, it's soft, it's full of hiding places. Basically a luxury inn for plague fleas. You once noticed a flea on your glove while examining a patient. You flicked it off, and it bounced directly into your mask beak. You spent the rest of the day wondering if it was still in there, nibbling on rose petals and planning your demise. Back at your quarters, which is a glorified shed near the city wall, you try to clean the outfit. There's no soap, no proper water pressure. You dab it with vinegar-soaked rags, which leaves the entire thing smelling like a salad gone bad. You hang it by the fire and hope the heat kills whatever's lurking in the seams. It doesn't. Also, it's worth noting, you never get a second set. This is your one and only outfit. If it tears, you stitch it. If it gets blood on it, and it will, you rub it with salt or ashes. If the beak cracks, congratulations, you're inhaling plague directly now. One doctor in Milan once patched his beak with wax and parchment. You try that once. It melts. You also don't get a proper storage space. No sterile locker, no clean hook. The robe lives in a corner of your room, slumped like a dead crow. Sometimes you swear you see it move in the candlelight. You've started talking to it. It doesn't answer yet. And still, you put it on every morning, even when it's damp, even when it's stiff with dried sweat and something that might be bile. Because the moment you step outside, everyone expects to see the plague doctor. Not you, not the man underneath, just the mask, the robes, the symbol. That's the real job, becoming the mask. You can't take it off in public. You can't be seen laughing or coughing or running. You have to walk slowly, carefully, like death with a walking stick. One day, a young apprentice follows you, trying to learn the trade. He asks, "Does the suit make you feel safe?" You pause, and you lie. "Yes," you say, "completely." Later that night, you dream of fire, of tearing the mask off your face and letting yourself breathe. But you never do, because breathing without the beak, that would be suicide. And it might be anyway. You said yes because of the money. The city offered you a hefty sum, more than you've ever made in your life, enough to buy land, enough to pay off debts, maybe even enough to retire to a quiet village far from the stink of crowded alleys and dying neighbors. That was the promise anyway. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. The city promises to pay you at the end of the contract, after the plague dies down, after the death toll stabilizes, after you've done your duty, and guess what? Most plague doctors never live long enough to collect. The irony burns like one of your vinegar compresses. Still, you try not to think about it too much. At least you're eating. The city provides meals, if you can call them that. Cold porridge, moldy bread, sometimes boiled onions or lentils, depending on what the quartermaster scraped together. You learn quickly to eat fast before the flies do. Your room is included too. It's a rickety hut near the quarantine zone, patched with old thatch and rotting planks. You sleep on a straw pallet with a blanket that smells like old soup. It leaks when it rains, sways when the wind blows, and creaks every time you move. You've named the rat living in the corner. He's more consistent than most people these days. There's no lock on the door, just a rope you tie shut from the inside. Sometimes you hear footsteps at night, scuffling, whispering, then silence. Once, someone tried to steal your mask. Probably just a prank. Or maybe they wanted to impersonate you. You don't want to know. Still, you wake every morning, pull on your outfit, and go out. You check the sick list, updated with charcoal on a cracked slate. The names never stop. Every day, more. Some crossed out, some replaced with all gone. The council occasionally drops off your wages, in theory. A few silver coins wrapped in cloth, tossed through the door like scraps to a dog. You're too tired to argue. Historians still argue whether plague doctors were really well paid or if the promise of payment was more of a PR move to recruit warm bodies. Some records show generous salaries. Others mention debts left unpaid for years. One doctor in Paris died penniless, his corpse tossed into a pit alongside his patients. So much for hazard pay. But here's the bitter twist. If you do survive, the city sometimes refuses to pay anyway. They claim the plague wasn't as bad as expected, that your contract is void because the mortality rate dipped, or they accuse you of neglect, which is rich, considering you've been wandering the filthiest parts of town with nothing but a stick and a bird mask. One doctor you knew, Claude, finally finished his term. He returned to City Hall to collect his promised gold. The treasurer smiled, handed him a purse, and then summoned a priest to bless him because they thought he was cursed. Claude left with less money than he started and a new limp from being shoved down the council steps. Still, the pay keeps others coming. There's always someone poorer, hungrier, desperate. Some families encourage their sons to take the job, believing it's a step up from digging ditches or shoveling muck. At least you'll die with honor, they say. Sure, honor. One day, you're called to the merchant quarter. The smell hits you halfway down the street. Rancid meat, burned feathers, something worse underneath. You step over a dead dog, try not to look at the flies swarming its mouth. Inside the house, it's quiet. Too quiet. A woman lies on the floor, her skin blotched purple and black. Her husband sits beside her, rocking slowly, eyes glazed over. You try to speak. He doesn't respond. Then you realize he's dead too, just hadn't fallen over yet. You mark the door with charcoal and move on. And then there's the rich, the nobility. The irony is, they want you around more than the poor do. The moment a noble gets the sniffles, you're summoned. Rushed across town, robes trailing, cane clacking. You knock on tall oak doors with your blood-stained stick. Inside, marble floors and polished silver. But the fear? The same. A young lord insists he's not sick, just overheated. You check his pulse. He has none. Just the flicker of a boil behind his ear and the stiff, unpleasant smile of denial. You offer him a draught of vinegar, he spits it out. Calls for wine instead. His family pays you triple for the visit. But they also ask you to lie, to tell guests he's recovering, to write a certificate saying it's not plague, just a seasonal illness. You do it. You need the coins. This happens more often than you care to admit. You become a secret keeper, a lie teller, a convenience. The rich will sometimes let you stay in their servant quarters overnight. They feed you better. Bread with actual flour, meat without maggots, sometimes even wine. But the pressure is suffocating. You're not there to help. You're there to not let it show. And when they die anyway, you're blamed for that too. Meanwhile, your body aches in ways it never has. Your back feels like it belongs to a much older man. Your knees creak with every step. You cough more than you used to. You tell yourself it's the smoke, the cold, the stress. It's not the plague. Right. You've started hoarding the money you get. Small coin bags stashed in cracks in the wall, under floorboards, behind your cot. You don't trust anyone, not the city, not the nobles, not even your fellow physicians, if you're lucky enough to meet another. Everyone wants what you have, or wants you gone. One quirky little detail. Some towns offered bonuses if the plague doctor stayed alive through the entire contract, like some morbid endurance test. If you survive 3 months, you get an extra 10 gold pieces. You imagine a medieval HR manager clapping enthusiastically. Great job not dying. You daydream about it sometimes. Retiring. Using your earnings to open a tavern, maybe a little herbal shop. A place with clean linens and no masks. But the dreams are fading. The job eats them. One night, after a particularly bad day, 5 children in one house, all gone, you sit by your single candle and count your coins. You think, I'm halfway there. Then a knock at the door, another summons, another shadow to walk through, and off you go again. Because the gold only matters if you live long enough to hold it. You're assigned the quarantine zone. Congratulations. That's medieval speak for you get to spend your days in the part of the city no one else dares enter. The plague quarter, the red-marked houses, the coughing alleys, the locked doors. It's quiet in this part of town. Not peaceful quiet, just that eerie, hollow silence you only hear in places where too many people have recently died. You walk past boarded-up homes, the planks marked with soot crosses and hastily painted warnings. Deus miserere. Keep out. Plague within. You hear the occasional dog barking, sometimes just the slow creak of a shutter moving in the breeze. Once you heard a lute playing. You followed the sound. It stopped. You never found the player. This is your territory now. You're the only one walking these streets. You knock on the first door on your list. No response. You knock again, using your cane to rap hard against the wood. The house groans back. You try the latch. It opens. Inside, a single figure lies curled in the corner, covered in blankets. You approach slowly, carefully. You don't want to startle them or step on something dangerous. You kneel beside the patient, a girl, maybe 12. Her eyes flutter open. She smiles faintly. You look like a bird, she whispers. You try to smile under your mask. A friendly bird, you say, voice muffled. She dies before nightfall. You mock the door. Then you walk to the next house. No one answers there either. You crack the door open, only to be greeted by the unmistakable smell of rot. The floorboards are smeared with something dark. You close it quietly. No need to go further. This repeats, day after day. You walk into rooms no one will ever walk into again. You catalog faces that no one will remember. You see bodies laid out like twisted dolls, clutching holy medallions or family keepsakes. Some are arranged neatly, as if someone tried to give them dignity. Others, not so much. One day you find an entire family, mother, father, 2 children, sitting around a table, bowls of soup in front of them, all gone, all frozen in the last moment before it all ended. You feel something shift inside you, like a crack in your chest. You don't cry, you don't have time. Instead, you walk outside and scratch a mark onto the door with a shard of pottery. Your gloves are too clumsy for charcoal today. At night, you try to sleep, but the sounds keep you up. Screams from down the road, weeping, chanting. Once laughter, high, shrill, and completely out of place. You sit up, heart pounding, but when you open your door, nothing, just the wind. One of the stranger fringe beliefs floating around is that if you stay in a plague house long enough, the spirits of the dead will start whispering to you. Some say they pull at your mask in the dark. Others claim they'll help you if you promise to join them. You laugh when you first hear this from a priest. Then you hear it again and again, enough times that you start to leave a candle burning overnight, just in case. The isolation wears on you. At first, you keep a log, names, symptoms, dates. You try to write neatly with purpose. Then the ink starts to run. The handwriting goes sideways. Eventually, it's just notes like "too late" or "no survivors." You tear the pages out and burn them one night after a particularly bad week. Food arrives sporadically. The city sends supplies every few days: bread, dried beans, vinegar. The delivery boy leaves it near the barricade, never getting close. You wave at him once. He turns and runs. Your clothes begin to stink. The suit never fully dries. Every morning, it's like pulling on a soggy shroud. The beak, once packed neatly with herbs, now holds the dusty remnants of what might be mint and lavender, or maybe just lint. You can't tell anymore. Historians still argue whether quarantine measures during medieval times were actually effective or just performed for show. Some towns had elaborate systems, red flags, city gates, guarded walls. Others simply pointed at the poor districts and said, "That's where the plague is," then lit the occasional bonfire and hoped God would notice. In your case, quarantine means this: no visitors, no relief, no escape. You're stuck. Your job is to visit each house, determine who's alive, who's sick, and who's too far gone. Then report back. Sometimes they ask for specifics. You lie. Say no signs of plague when you can't stomach the details. Other times, they don't ask at all. They just want to know if it's safe to reopen the street. It never is. There's a makeshift infirmary in the quarantine zone, a wooden shed with some hay-stuffed cots and a few cracked jugs of wine for pain relief. You help tend the worst cases there. A man with a swollen face that no longer looks human. A mother with 2 children clinging to her, both coughing blood. You try to comfort them, but your voice comes out cold through the mask. You hate the mask. You start to talk to yourself during visits. Little things. Here we go. Another one. You're okay. You're okay. Just to hear your own voice. One day, you find a woman alive. Barely. You carry her to the infirmary yourself. She's light, like a sack of feathers. She survives 3 days, then gone. Still, that was 3 days longer than most. You count that as a win. You begin to lose track of time. There's no routine here, just repetition. Wake, dress, walk, knock, scribe, eat, sleep, repeat. Days blur into nights. Nights blur into long candlelit hours where you try not to think too hard. Once you'd try to sketch a bird you saw perched on a rooftop. Your namesake, maybe, but the drawing looks wrong, warped. You crumple it and toss it in the fire. Another time, you try to whistle under your mask. You used to whistle, not anymore. Sometimes you wonder if this whole part of the city is just forgotten, like it's slipped through the cracks of the world and only you remain to wander its dying breath. You're a phantom, a specter, the last visitor to a city that doesn't want to be remembered. And even then, you keep going, because someone has to walk through the dead silence. Someone has to knock. Someone has to see. The first time someone throws something at you, it's a cabbage, a small, rotting one. It hits your mask and slides off with a wet slap. You blink behind the foggy glass of your beak, stunned. You're not sure whether to be angry or oddly impressed, considering the woman who threw it is wearing only one shoe and shouting something about demons. Welcome to the public relations side of being a plague doctor. See, most people don't understand what you do. They don't trust you. And how could they? You wander the streets dressed like a bird. You appear only when someone's dying. You don't bring medicine. You bring fear. You're not a healer. You're a bad omen in leather. At this point, you've become the medieval version of a jump scare. The kids, terrified. One ran screaming the other day, tripped over his own foot, and broke a tooth. His mother blamed you, as if your presence was more dangerous than the death toll rising outside her door. Adults aren't much better. Some avert their eyes. Others mutter prayers as you pass. A few, braver or more desperate, grab your sleeve and beg you to save their loved ones. You wish you could. You really, really do. And then there are the ones who hate you. There's this whole undercurrent of superstition. Plague as divine punishment sent by God for sin. In that worldview, you're interfering with divine will. How dare you show up in your ridiculous bird face trying to treat something clearly sent to cleanse the earth? One woman stands outside her home clutching a crucifix and spitting at your feet. You bring it with you, she screams. You mark our doors. You whisper to death. You try to explain that you're here to help, that you only come when summoned, that your marks are part of city record-keeping. She doesn't care. She throws a rock, misses, but still. You walk away, back rigid, resisting the urge to say something unkind. The irony, of course, is that you do whisper to death sometimes, because it's the only thing that answers back. Historians still argue whether plague doctors were seen as heroes or villains. Probably a bit of both. In cities where you had some success, fewer deaths, slower spread, you might be hailed as a saint. But in towns where death kept winning, you were just another part of the nightmare. Sometimes, when you arrive at a house, the door slams shut before you even knock. You hear movement inside, furniture being shoved against the door, voices hissing, "It's him! He's come for us!" You're not surprised anymore. Once you approached a small village outside your city district. Just a field and a few huts, really. You were following up on a report of infection. A man saw you coming and rang a bell tied to a post. Moments later, 3 others appeared with pitchforks and torches. You backed away slowly. They followed. You ended up sprinting across a frozen field, boots sliding, robes flapping, as they shouted, "Get out, crow devil!" That was the day you tore your robe on a briar patch. It never stitched quite right again. Another time, you're invited into a home, treated with respect. The family even offers you warm broth and thanks you for your service. You're stunned, grateful, almost moved to tears. And then, 2 days later, the same family tries to bribe you to declare them plague-free so they can leave town. You refuse. They stop smiling. Trust is fragile out here. You try to hold on to your humanity, to remember that fear makes people do strange things. One fringe story you hear involves a town that built effigies of plague doctors out of hay and burned them in public squares. Not out of hatred, more like a bizarre act of spiritual protection. Burn the bird, ward off the sickness. You're not sure if it worked, but you hope they used better herbs in the beak than you did. Back in the city, the rumors swirl. Plague doctors are witches. They carry the sickness in their cloaks. They eat the hearts of the dead. You hear it all. You stop correcting people. It's like trying to mop a flood with a napkin. And yet, strangely, you're also seen as necessary. A terrifying symbol, yes, but one people expect to see. If you weren't there, they'd panic. Your presence, for all its dread, is a kind of awful comfort. You're proof that someone, somewhere, is still keeping track, that the city hasn't completely given up. You're the canary in the coal mine, except the canary wears a plague mask and doesn't sing. One day, a child gives you a flower, a small wilted daisy. You look around, confused. Her mother watches from the doorway, saying nothing. You tuck the daisy into your robe. It wilts completely within the hour. Still, you keep it. And then there are the moments, fleeting, precious, when someone does thank you. A man grabs your hand, against protocol, but you let it happen, and says, "You're the only one who came." His wife is dead, but he's alive, and someone showed up. That's you, the only one who showed up, even though they fear you, even though they throw cabbages and call you a devil, even though they lock their doors and hide their sick. You keep walking. You keep knocking. You keep watching. Because if you don't, who will? So here's a fun little reality of your daily life. Nobody actually tells you what to do. There's no training, no handbook, no senior plague doctor to shadow, no emergency scroll labeled, "So you've been hired to battle the Black Death." The city hires you, throws a mask and stick at you, and expects you to just figure it out. You're supposed to treat the sick, record deaths, recommend public health measures, and occasionally dissect a corpse or two. And while that all sounds heroic in theory, in practice it means you spend most of your time trying to remember if clove oil goes in the vinegar rinse or the foot poultice. Spoiler, you're pretty sure it doesn't work in either. You get your medical knowledge from a random hodgepodge of sources, Galen, Hippocrates, Avicenna, and your uncle's herbal remedy scrolls that include a suspiciously high number of entries involving sheep urine. You've read about humors and imbalances, but that's all abstract until you're holding someone's hand as they die with their skin turning black. There's no standard plague treatment. You go house to house, trying things and hoping something sticks. You've applied leeches, tried bloodletting, used mustard plasters, and even experimented with a compress made of crushed figs and human sweat. It went badly. The patient slapped you, then died. But you keep going because, again, no one's telling you what not to do either. The medical understanding of the time is a swirling soup of superstition, guesswork, and deeply held traditions that haven't been updated since the Roman Empire. You've met a priest who swears that holding a toad to your chest will draw the sickness out. Another swears by amulets made from the bones of martyrs. You try both. Nothing happens. Historians still argue whether these makeshift treatments had any psychosomatic effect or were just pure placebo. One thing's for sure. You're throwing herbs at a wildfire and hoping they stick. At one point, you're given a small book titled Cures Most Certain for the Plague and Egg, written by a man who died in the middle of writing chapter 3. You carry it in your satchel like a Bible, not because it works, but because it's something to hold, something to point at. When someone asks, "Do you know what you're doing?" You don't, but you pretend. One day, a merchant offers you money to perform the official blessing. You have no idea what that means, so you make one up. You stand in his doorway, hold out your cane, mumble a few Latin phrases you half remember from church, and flick vinegar in a wide arc. He seems satisfied. His house still gets infected a week later. You once saw another plague doctor across the square. Rare, like spotting a reflection that moves independently. You tried to wave. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. You wanted to ask, "Hey, do you actually know what you're doing?" But he disappeared into a side alley before you could reach him. Still, you experiment. You try to organize your time, set priorities, keep basic records. You start rating houses by likelihood of survival. You focus more on the younger patients. They still die. But you try. Sometimes you even start diagnosing based on symptom patterns. A patient with sudden fever and swollen groin glands, that's classic bubonic. Rapid chills and coughing blood, pneumonic. Seizures, collapse, and death within hours. Septicemic. You begin to distinguish which patients might make it and which ones you shouldn't spend too long with. This is what figuring it out looks like in the Middle Ages. And then there are the days when everything you know gets upended. You arrive at a house with 5 infected residents. You treat them with vinegar compresses and a diet of broth and mint tea. All survive. Next day, same treatment, same symptoms. Everyone dies. You sit in the street afterward, elbows on your knees, and stare at the cobblestones like they're going to explain what just happened. Spoiler, they don't. You've come to realize your real job isn't treating the plague, it's maintaining order. People feel better if someone in a mask is walking around with a stick and a pouch full of rosemary. They feel like someone's doing something, even if it's just waving incense around and mumbling in Latin. You also have to write reports, vague ones. Number of new cases today, 26. Deaths since last record, 14. You're supposed to estimate when the plague might peak. You write uncertain every time. Sometimes, just to spice things up, you write growing worse. No one argues. One quirky detail you picked up from an old Roman scroll. Some physicians believed that music helped rebalance the humors. So, for a week, you hum softly while visiting patients. Just a low tune, a lullaby almost. People look at you like you've lost your mind. But hey, it gives you something to do besides think. You also try burning herbs in the corners of sick rooms. Juniper, sage, bay leaves. The smoke burns your eyes. You develop a cough that lasts 3 days. It's fine. Everything's fine. Eventually, you hear of another doctor who's trying to drain the buboes, lancing them with a hot knife, then applying onion paste. You try it once. The patient screams so loudly, you bite your tongue in surprise. Blood and onion juice spray everywhere. It smells like soup and despair. The patient survives 3 more days. You decide that's a win. There's no structure, no hierarchy, no backup. You're it. And on some level, you start to feel like a fraud. Like any moment now, someone will pull off your beak and reveal that you have no idea what you're doing. But no one does, because you're the plague doctor and no one wants your job, which means you just keep making it up as you go. So here's a question you stop asking after the first month. Why don't we just leave? Because yes, cities are crawling with sickness. The air smells like decay. The rivers run thick with waste. The streets echo with the wails of the newly widowed. Wouldn't it make sense to grab your satchel and vanish into the countryside, far away from the coughing and the funerals? You'd think. But no, you stay. You're not a prisoner exactly, but your feet might as well be nailed to the cobblestones. See, when the plague strikes, towns become cages. The gates close, travel is restricted, guards watch the roads. People caught sneaking out are turned back, or worse, beaten, jailed, or accused of spreading the disease. There's a law, written in desperate ink, that says no one leaves without proper cleansing and documentation. And who writes the documentation? You! You sign papers declaring homes cleansed. You issue vague, not presently infected slips to the merchants. You recommend quarantine periods. But nobody really checks if you're following protocol because no one actually knows what the protocol is. It's like pretending there's a manual when you're actually writing it, page by page, in your own sweat. Even if you wanted to leave, you're being paid not to. You signed a contract with the city, usually some rushed document with impressive-sounding seals, stating you'll remain on duty until the plague ends. You get room, board, and a salary. Technically, in reality, the money's late, the lodging is drafty, and you share your mattress with fleas that could probably qualify for citizenship by now. Still, you're better off than most. You're not starving. You have access to vinegar. You even get a guard escort through the worst parts of town, though half the time they just stand behind you, gagging into their sleeves. There's also the awkward truth that if you do leave, you might be spreading the plague. You've seen what happens when infected people travel. One sailor, one beggar, one doctor. That's all it takes to seed a new outbreak. Entire villages fall because someone didn't wash their boots properly. And so, you stay, like a soldier on the front line of a war that doesn't end. Historians still argue whether these containment efforts actually worked or just created pressure cookers of disease. Some say the quarantine slowed the spread. Others think they just concentrated the die-in. You don't know. You're not in the position to study patterns. You're too busy trying not to breathe too deeply. The city itself transforms into a quarantine zone. Entire districts are cordoned off with ropes and signs. Red crosses are painted on doors. Town criers walk the streets, announcing new curfews, updated death counts, and public health orders that sound like bedtime stories if bedtime stories involved rats and rot. You learn to move like a ghost, quiet, efficient, in and out. Sometimes you pause at the edge of the city, staring out at the hills. They're green, breezy. Birds fly over them like nothing's wrong. A shepherd tends his flock far away, looking small and blessed. You imagine dropping your beaked mask, walking until your legs give out, collapsing into a patch of wildflowers. But the fantasy ends when someone screams your name from behind. Another house, another patient, another job only you can do. And let's be honest, if you did leave, where would you go? Every town's afraid of plague doctors. You're too conspicuous to disappear. You look like a cursed scarecrow on stilts. You'd be chased out of every village from here to Rome. One doctor you knew tried it, took off the mask, burned his robes, fled to the countryside. Rumor has it he made it to a coastal inn. 3 days later, the innkeeper's family was dead. No one talks about him anymore. So you stay, not out of loyalty, but out of grim practicality. This is your plague now. You sleep in your coat. You eat alone. You drink vinegar water. You avoid touching your face. You pray when you remember how. You once asked your landlord if he thought the plague would end soon. He looked at you and said, "If God wants it." You didn't ask again. But sometimes, just sometimes, you get creative. You build your own decontamination chamber out of a wine barrel and some steam. Doesn't work, but you feel clever. You sew extra herbs into your mask lining, still cough. You avoid meat for a while, just to see. Nothing changes. Eventually, you give up on the idea of escape, not because you've accepted your fate, but because you've outlasted the part of your brain that still fantasized about fields and freedom. You become part of the city, like a gargoyle, perched, watching, waiting. One fringe detail that sticks with you comes from an old French manual. Apparently, some cities used boats as floating quarantine stations, entire ships anchored offshore, stuffed with the infected. Floating purgatories. You wonder if that's better or worse than this. Then you remember you get seasick. Still worse, probably. You once joked with a gravedigger, yes, joked, that you were going to carve a map of the city onto your cane to track the outbreaks. He took you seriously and started showing up with charcoal and parchment. Now you two have an unofficial chart, speckled with black dots, like a plague constellation. You keep it hidden in your satchel. For science or for sanity, you're not sure. You imagine historians hundreds of years from now looking at your notes and arguing about what you meant. Whether the black dots were coded warnings, whether your vinegar cures were revolutionary or just desperate. Here's the truth. You didn't stay because you were brave. You stayed because leaving felt like betrayal, and because there was no real outside left. The whole world, as far as you can see, is one big sick city with the gates shut tight. So, you do what you always do. You wake up, put on the mask, and go knock on another door. So here's a detail that might surprise you. The mask, the infamous beaked thing everyone associates with plague doctors, was never meant to be scary. It was meant to be practical, sort of. You slide it over your face every morning like armor, leather, stiff and cracking, lined with linen to soak up the vinegar, 2 glass eye holes, always fogged from your breath, and the beak, curved and long like some nightmarish bird, stuffed with herbs, spices, dried rose petals, and occasionally a little scrap of mint to keep your nostrils from staging a mutiny. The theory was miasma. That disease floated through the air in bad smells. And if bad air could hurt you, then good smells might protect you. Simple logic, really, just completely wrong. But it's the best they had. And you've grown attached to the thing. You spend time arranging the herbs just right. A sprig of thyme here, a twist of orange peel there. Once, someone slipped in a bit of lavender soap. You almost cried. Almost. Here's a mainstream fact. The design of the beak mask is often credited to Charles Delorme, a French physician who lived in the 1600s. He created the outfit as a protective uniform. Long coat, gloves, waxed boots, and that iconic mask. But during the height of the earlier outbreaks, especially in your time, versions of the costume are already being cobbled together by desperate city councils and paranoid healers. No one really agrees what the first plague mask looked like. Historians still argue whether it was ever widely worn in the 14th century or whether it came later and retroactively got stapled onto your era like a bad Photoshop job. Either way, you wear it every day, and people fear you for it. They flinch when you walk by. Children scream. Dogs bark. Once, an old man threw a cabbage at your head and shouted, "Death bird!" You didn't blame him. You looked like a death bird. That's the strange part. You are hired to help, but you're treated like an omen, a walking curse. Some people spit as you pass. Others make the sign of the cross. You knock on doors and hear them bolt shut from the inside. You announce your presence in alleys, and people vanish into the shadows. And yet, they also need you. They open their doors when they're desperate. They cry in your arms when the fever spikes. They hand you their infants, shaking and red, with eyes that plead, "Please, fix this." You can't, but you try. So you endure the mask. It makes eating a logistical nightmare. You have to remove it carefully away from people, usually in an alley or back room. You've learned to drink soup through a straw made of reed. Not ideal, but you've stopped caring about ideal. You've even started customizing your mask. A little notch for airflow, padding near the nose. You're thinking of carving something on the beak, maybe a small symbol, like a sun or a feather. You've seen others do that. Doctors in Venice especially. They treat their masks like talismans. You understand why. Your gloves are equally ridiculous. Thick leather, stiff with age, impossible to feel anything through them. You drop your cane at least twice a day. You've given up trying to pick up coins. People just place things in your open palm like you're a medieval vending machine. Your robe is waxed canvas, meant to repel poisoned fluids. It smells perpetually of vinegar, sweat, and damp wool. You've patched it so many times it's more stitches than fabric. One sleeve is a completely different color, stolen from a merchant's tarp when yours ripped during a scuffle. A quirky fringe detail you once heard? In some towns, plague doctors were made to wear bells, like livestock. Little warning chimes to announce their presence. You thank the stars your city doesn't require that. You can't imagine trying to sneak through a sleeping household sounding like a haunted goat. Still, the outfit works, at least psychologically. It creates distance, not just physical, but emotional. People don't see you. They see the doctor. The mask makes it easier for them to cry in front of you, confess things, fall apart. It makes it easier for you not to collapse with them. Sometimes, late at night, you take it off slowly, lay it beside your cot like a sleeping companion. You stare at it for a long time. It stares back. You wonder who you are without it, whether you'd even recognize your own face now, whether your reflection would still flinch. Some days, you forget what your skin looks like beneath the sweat and the leather strap marks. And you worry, what if the mask stops working? You hear stories, rumors, that the plague is learning, that it doesn't care about your herbs or your vinegar-soaked rags. You hear about plague doctors collapsing mid-round, their bodies stripped and burned before they even cool. You tell yourself it's just gossip, but one morning you feel a tickle in your throat. You cough just once. You pretend it didn't happen. That's another thing the mask gives you, plausible deniability. If no one can see your face, no one can see your fear. And there is fear, always, pressed against your ribs like a second heartbeat. You don't admit it, not out loud, but it's there, with every knock on every door. Still, you wear the mask. You walk into another house. You smell the air, sharp, metallic, wrong. You whisper a prayer into the beak, more out of habit than hope. And the work continues. You think you've seen every way a person can die. And then someone dies in a new way. That's the job. You're not a healer, not really. You're more like an observer of endings. an overqualified mourner with a clipboard, a delivery person for bad news who occasionally carries leeches and vinegar. But your main role, witness. And the things you witness are creatively horrible. You don't always see it coming. Some patients seem fine in the morning, chatty even, making jokes about the afterlife, asking if you'll name a rat after them, and then by nightfall, they're gone, just like that, as if death didn't even knock, just walked in, helped itself to the furniture, and set fire to the place on the way out. You've learned to recognize the signs. The buboes, of course, swollen lymph nodes in the armpits, neck, groin, big as eggs, black as ink, hot to the touch, sunburst. Most don't get the chance. The fever climbs, the skin bruises from the inside out, the tongue swells, the eyes glass over. You try to keep your distance, but people beg. They cling to your coat. They ask if they'll live. They whisper secrets they don't want their family to hear. And you nod, gently, like you might know something you don't. Historians still argue whether the plague was purely bubonic or whether it also spread in its pneumonic form, airborne, fast, and cruel, or even septicemic, turning blood into poison before symptoms could even emerge. In your experience, it's all of the above. Some days it's the lungs, some days it's the blood, some days it's everything at once. You stop trying to classify. The worst are the children. There's a little girl you remember, Eleanor. She'd lost her mother a week prior and her father the day before. You came to check on her. She greeted you at the door like it was a game. She wore her father's shoes, way too big, and tried to make you laugh by stomping around like a bear. The next day, she was dead. You sat in silence on the stoop for nearly an hour afterward, mask in your lap, watching the flies gather. There's no training for that. No herbal sachet strong enough to erase the image. You develop coping strategies. You count your steps between houses. You whistle through your beak, soft and tuneless. You memorize bird songs. You recite poetry. You make little bets with yourself. If the next patient has both shoes on, they'll survive. Spoiler, they usually don't. One fringe practice you've seen? Some doctors carry small death mirrors, tiny polished brass circles they hold beneath a patient's nose. If the surface fogs, the patient's still breathing. If not, time to get the cart. You carry one too, though you rarely use it. You trust your ears more. You can hear the moment a chest falls silent, like a bell suddenly ceasing to ring. Sometimes you fake good news. You tell a family their son has a chance, even when you know. You do it for them, not for him. People need something to hold on to, even if it's made of mist. They'll forgive the lie when the body cools. Eventually, or they won't. A few have blamed you outright, accused you of bringing the plague instead of treating it. You've had rocks thrown, doors slammed. One man tried to set your robes on fire. He was coughing blood the whole time. You didn't fight back. You just walked away. The silence after death is its own sound. A kind of pressure in the air, like thunder that never arrives. You begin to expect it. You step into a home and feel it. Whether someone is still clinging on or if the room has already emptied of life, you stop saying prayers, but you still light candles. It's mechanical now. One candle for each dead. You place them on windowsills, mark the frame with chalk, and move on. One house, 2, 3. By evening, your hands are sooty with wax and ash. You once dreamed of being a scholar. Thought maybe you'd write treatises on anatomy or draw charts of the stars. Instead, your most consistent work is tallying the dead with charcoal on damp parchment. There's a secret you've only told the rats. Sometimes you name the bodies, not with their real names. You don't always know those, but names like Quiet One, Last Laugh, Socks on Backwards, Lady Who Hummed, just something to give the death shape. A word to hold in your mind while you close their eyes and cover them with a blanket. They deserve that much. In the plague pits, there's no ceremony, just heaps, limbs twisted together, dirt shoveled fast. The grave diggers work in silence now. The jokes have run out. You nod at them, they nod at you, and no one says what you're all thinking. We're going to end up here too. Still, you return, each day, each death. You tell yourself, it's for the living. But really, it's for the dead. Someone needs to remember. Someone needs to see. And that someone, for now, is you. You're starting to forget what silence used to sound like, because the city never truly quiets anymore. Even at night, there's always some background murmur. The distant wheel of a death cart creaking over cobblestones. A scream in the dark that cuts off too fast. Coughing, always coughing, from behind shuttered windows. Even the rats make more noise now, bold and reckless in their midnight scurrying. And the bells, always the bells, tolling for the dead, announcing plague notices, summoning workers to the pits, marking curfews. Some say they've started hearing bells that aren't ringing at all. You wonder if you're one of them. The city, your city, is unraveling. Slowly, steadily, like a frayed rope, and you are tied to it, whether you like it or not. You walk the same streets every day, but they keep changing. Shops boarded up, inns closed, bread stalls abandoned, loaves hardening in the sun. Entire neighborhoods go silent and then rot. You used to know the names of shopkeepers. You used to wave at the candlemaker's daughter. Now, you just count the number of windows that are blackened and still. Mainstream historical fact. In plague-stricken cities, governments often issued quarantine orders that split neighborhoods into zones. Hot and safe. Walls went up, guards were stationed, entire families were locked inside with no way to leave. Food would be passed through holes or lowered on ropes, but if no one came to collect it, well, the conclusion was assumed. You pass one such building every morning, a red X painted across the door. No sounds inside for days. You don't knock. You used to knock. The hardest part is how the city clings to denial, even as it dies. People still argue in the markets over price. Bakers still undercut each other over grain. There's a man on the corner who still shouts sermons, swearing the plague is a test from God and that only those who give up their shoes will be spared. You once saw him buying boots. There are fringe ideas everywhere now. People carry dried toads in their pockets. Some hang garlic necklaces from door frames. One woman drags a cauldron of burning rosemary through the streets twice a day, muttering Latin words she probably made up on the spot. No one stops her, honestly. The air smells better after she passes. There's even talk of planets. That Saturn and Jupiter aligned wrong, or Venus got too close to something she shouldn't have. You smile when you hear it. It's as reasonable as anything else. You wish the planets had caused it. At least then you could blame the sky instead of yourself. Historians still argue whether public authorities handled the plague with coordinated strategy or spiraled into chaos and superstition. From where you stand, it's both. Some leaders issue proclamations, wax-sealed, impressive-looking, filled with words like containment and cleansing. Others just vanish. You haven't seen the mayor in weeks. Rumor says he's barricaded himself in a wine cellar with 3 doctors and a personal cook. You try not to think about it too hard. Your own district is one of the working zones, which really just means enough people here are still alive to light the street lamps and dump the waste into the river. It's not a comfort, especially because the river is starting to bubble in ways it shouldn't. You saw a dog drink from it and immediately throw up. You made a note to avoid the fish for the foreseeable future. At night, you retreat to your quarters, small, dark, tucked behind an apothecary who's long since stopped opening his shutters. The ceiling leaks, the walls crack, but it's quiet mostly, and quiet is luxury now. You light a candle, sit on the floor, take off your gloves, one finger at a time, and listen. Sometimes you journal, though it's more out of habit than hope. Your handwriting has become tight and narrow. You don't waste ink on flourishes anymore, just facts, observations, names. You draw little maps of the city, noting which streets are empty, which houses burned, which wells to avoid. You wonder who'll read them when you're gone. You try not to think in terms of when you're gone, but the thought is stubborn. Like the buzzing of a fly you can't swat. You keep an eye on your colleagues when you see them, which is rare now. You used to have 6 other plague doctors working nearby. You're pretty sure 2 are dead. 1 left for the countryside. The other 3 are like ghosts. Sometimes you cross paths, masked and silent. Just a nod, no words. There is one who talks, kind of. His name's Moritz. Short, round, wears a beak mask painted gold, looks ridiculous, acts serious. You see him once a week, near the cathedral. You always swap stories, not pleasant ones, more like grim trivia. He once told you he found a cat in a cupboard, alive, sitting between 2 corpses. You still think about that cat. It didn't run when he opened the door, just blinked and meowed. You've stopped flinching at dead bodies, but that meow, that stayed with you. The city is evolving into something else now. Less community, more inertia. People aren't living so much as not yet dead. You see it in their eyes. Dull, defensive, like candles burning at both ends. Still, there are glimmers. A child skipping rope with a length of twine and humming a song you haven't heard in years. A man playing a lute badly, but with enthusiasm. A woman painting a mural on her shutters, flowers, birds, the sun. You pause to watch. She looks up and smiles. You forget how rare smiles have become. That night, you dream of the city as it was, bustling, loud, overpriced pies at the square, music, arguing bakers, no red X's, no carts, just life. When you wake, you lie still, trying to hold on to the shape of it, but it slips away, like everything else lately. Still, you get up, you mask up, you step outside, because the city still needs witnesses, and you're not done watching. You can smell it before you see it. Death has a scent. Did you know that? Not just the rot of bodies, though that's part of it. No, it's the layers. The vinegar on your coat, the sweat of the living, the damp wood of hastily built coffins, the metallic tang of blood that hasn't yet dried, and under it all, a sweetness that turns the stomach, like fruit left too long in the sun. It clings to your nostrils, even inside the mask, even through layers of rose petals and myrrh. Some days, you forget there's a world outside that doesn't reek like this. You forget what fresh air even feels like. You're headed to the river district today, the worst hit quadrant. That's where they've opened the new plague pit, more like a canyon, deep, steep, lined with the gray powder of quicklime. Bodies go in fast, stacked like cordwood. It's the only place with room left. Mainstream historical fact. Many plague pits were mass graves dug just beyond the city gates, filled daily by carts of the dead. Gravediggers worked day and night. Quicklime was used to hasten decomposition, though it did little to keep the rats and dogs away. You passed 2 carts on the way there, one empty, heading back for more, the other creaking under its load. The driver nods at you, doesn't speak. There's nothing left to say. You both know what today holds. You arrive just as the sun rises. It's pink today, surprisingly beautiful. The way the light touches the rooftops almost makes you forget, until the breeze shifts and the smell reminds you where you are. The pit is deeper than yesterday. The men working it wear cloths over their faces, soaked in wine or lavender. It helps a little. They shovel quickly, without looking too closely at what their hands touch. One sings under his breath. You think it's a lullaby? You don't help bury today. You're here to mark. Every body must be counted, logged. Not by name, those are long gone, but by description, rough estimate of age, clothing, condition. It's the city's way of pretending there's still order, still control. You scratch numbers onto your wax tablet, the stylus sticky in your glove. This one's a boy, no more than 10. He's wearing a red cap. You call him Red Cap. You write that down. You step back as the diggers heave him into the pit. He disappears into the tangle of limbs and cloth. No one says a prayer. No one has time. There's a theory circulating now that miasma, the bad air, is what's causing all this. Not contagion, not contact. Just foul smells rising from places like this. That's why they burn herbs in the streets. That's why you stuff flowers into your mask. And honestly, it might be true. You've seen people catch the plague just by passing through the wrong alley. Historians still argue whether miasma theory delayed true medical progress or if, ironically, it helped by encouraging cleanliness and better airflow. For you, the line between science and survival is paper thin. Whatever keeps you alive today is truth enough. One of the grave diggers waves you over. Something odd. It's a bundle wrapped in a wool blanket. Small. When they unfold it, you see it's a woman. Pregnant, maybe. Her hands are curled over her belly like she died trying to protect it. You hesitate. It's the first time you've hesitated all day. You nod. They lay her in the pit, carefully. No jokes this time. You move on. Nearby, there's another cart waiting. But this one's different. The driver isn't a city worker. He's a man you don't recognize, dressed too finely, face pale as chalk. He claims the bodies in the back are from a noble household, special burial required, private plot, family tomb, sealed with prayers and wax. You don't believe him, but you don't argue. You mark them anyway. 2 women, one old, one young, possibly a mother and daughter. The cart smells heavily of perfume and something sharper, camphor maybe, as if someone tried to preserve the bodies. It didn't work. You suggest he go quickly before the air warms more. He does. You step away from the pit, your tablet heavy with numbers. As you do, a gravedigger lights incense at the edge, a quiet ritual, no words, just smoke curling into the morning sky, trying, failing to mask the scent. You watch it drift, and in a strange moment, you remember your childhood, running through meadows with tall grass, chasing fireflies. You remember your mother baking bread. You remember a song. It's gone just as fast, snapped back by the sound of a body landing hard in the pit. Thud. The grave diggers are still working. They don't stop. Neither do you. There's a routine to this now. Wake, walk, mark, bury, leave. You count the dead because someone must. You do it by candlelight when necessary. You whisper the numbers to yourself as if they're a spell. 14 today, 18 yesterday. A low day is a miracle. You once logged 46. You didn't sleep that night. On your way home, you pass the baker's square. The stalls are empty. The cobbles are sticky with spilled mead from a broken cask no one bothered to clean. A dog sniffs it, then trots off. At the edge of the square is a wall covered in charcoal drawings. Someone's been illustrating the plague. Skulls, mostly, but also people. Scenes. A child holding a flower. A figure in a beaked mask. Someone drew you. It's a rough sketch, but unmistakable. The long coat, the staff, the eyes, hollow and tired. There's a small scribbled word next to it in crooked Latin, custos, the guardian. You don't know who wrote it, but for a brief moment, you don't feel invisible. You head home, remove your gloves, sit in the dark. The numbers from the day still echo in your mind, and you wonder how many more you'll have to write before this ends. Sleep doesn't come easily anymore. Your dreams are crowded, too full of faces you've seen but never spoken to, voices you almost remember, eyes that never close. You wake with the feeling that someone is watching you, only to realize it's your own reflection in the small mirror across the room. Your mask hangs beside it. Even in sleep, you can't quite escape it. The mask never really leaves you, does it? By now, the shape of it has imprinted itself in your mind. That beaked silhouette, you see it in windows, in puddles, in your peripheral vision. You've worn it so long, you sometimes forget your real face. When was the last time anyone saw it? You don't remember. But today, you do something new. You go to the university district, not to treat, not to mark the dead. You go because someone asked for you by name. The letter arrived last night, folded neatly and slipped under your door. The script was careful, formal. It summoned you to the quarters of Dr. Petrus Valerius, a natural philosopher who fancies himself an expert in contagion, the kind of man who wears a ruff at breakfast and corrects your Latin mid-sentence. Mainstream historical fact. During the Black Death, many medieval universities remained hubs of scientific debate, even as the plague tore through their cities. Scholars clung to theories of humors, astrology, and divine punishment, while a few outliers quietly started building the foundation of epidemiology. You've met Valerius once in passing. He eyed your outfit with visible disgust, called you costumed desperation. You liked him instantly. His quarters are deep in the university cloisters where the plague hasn't hit as hard. The scholars barricaded the gates early. Anyone showing symptoms was turned away, some even by force. You see one such warning carved into a wooden door, a red handprint, fingers splayed, with the words, "Non intrabis," you shall not enter. Valerius greets you in a robe too long for his arms and sandals that slap loudly on the stone floor. His hair is wild, his eyes brighter than you expected. You follow him through the corridor into a cluttered room that smells faintly of ink and desperation. "Do you believe in vapors?" he asks, mid-step. You blink behind your mask. "I believe in bad smells," you reply. "Fair," he nods. "But what about transmission? Can the plague move without a host? On cloth? Through breath? On coin?" You don't know. No one knows. But you say what you've seen. Families fallen sick days after opening a window. Children untouched while their parents rot. A tailor who died after measuring a feverish man's inseam. Valerius scribbles as you speak. He shows you a diagram, crude but ambitious, a drawing of lungs, arrows, particles too small to see. "We are breathing each other's deaths," he mutters, "every day." He leads you to a large jar on his desk. Inside floats a rat, and not just a rat, a plague rat. Dead, bloated. There's a black spot on its belly the size of a coin, a swollen node. He's trying to trace patterns, he says. Who dies fastest? Who survives? He's even gathered a collection of flea specimens. You eye the jar. "You know they bite," you say. "I wear gloves," he replies proudly. Historians still argue whether medieval scholars truly suspected fleas as vectors or whether later discoveries were retroactively applied to their notes. Some writings from the period mention small insects in the bedding or jumping lice on the sick. But it's unclear whether they understood the role these creatures played. Valerius opens a drawer and hands you a parchment, a rough chart, rows and columns, names, ages, time from first symptom to death. He's mapped patterns across neighborhoods, hot spots, cold zones. One street, he notes, seems oddly spared. Perhaps immunity, he whispers, or pure dumb luck. He wants to test a theory, whether certain people are simply resistant, whether exposure matters, whether you are immune. You flinch. The idea makes your stomach twist. You've seen what the plague does too many times. You don't want to invite it into your blood just to prove a theory. He assures you it's all hypothetical. You don't believe him. Still, you take his chart, fold it into your coat. Knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, might help. Before you leave, he offers you something unexpected, a small tin of salve, homemade, clove, turpentine, maybe wormwood. He says it repels fleas. You accept it. It smells like an apothecary's sock drawer, but it's better than nothing. On the way home, you test it. Dab a little on your gloves. The street dogs avoid you more than usual. You count that as success. Passing through the western gate, you notice a new structure, a tent, bright red, pitched near the square. A sign hangs above it, Sanctum Medicorum, a healing sanctuary. You recognize the style, church-sponsored. You peer inside. It's cleaner than you expected. A nun sits at a table, ladling soup into small clay bowls. A priest blesses each person who enters, murmuring low Latin prayers. A child cries in a corner, clutching a rag doll missing one arm. You're struck by the contrast. Here, people still try to help each other, still offer warmth, still believe in something. A woman coughs, deep and wet. The nun presses a cloth to her forehead and smiles. You linger a moment longer, then move on. By the time you reach your own quarters, the city has shifted again. There's graffiti on your door, a chalk drawing of your mask. Below it, why do you survive? You erase it with the side of your sleeve. But you don't have an answer. You're beginning to notice something strange. It's not the bodies, those you've grown used to. It's not even the silence that wraps the city each evening like a damp wool blanket. No, it's the eyes. People are watching you more now, not with gratitude or even suspicion. It's something more primal, like you become a symbol of the plague itself, a walking omen. You step into an alley and shutters close. You enter a home and the room feels colder. Even the dogs don't bark anymore. They just stare. You wonder, do they see a healer or a herald? The morning starts as most do, with a summons. A family near the cathedral has fallen ill, and you're requested, not urgently, but pointedly. There's a difference. Urgency is panic. This is obligation. You cross the main square where the bells once rang for weddings and market days. Now, they toll only for the dead. One long peal for a child, two for an adult, three if the house must be sealed. Today it tolls three. You keep walking. The house is large, too large, really, for this part of the city. A remnant of old money, the kind that wears lace even when no one's looking. The gates are ajar, the garden overgrown. Ivy strangles the statuary, and a fountain filled with rainwater smells faintly of mildew and rose rot. You knock gently, out of habit, not hope. The door opens slowly, not by a servant, but a girl, maybe 13. Her eyes are glassy. Her hair hangs limp over one shoulder. She says nothing, just turns and walks into the darkness. You follow. The smell hits you immediately, not just illness, decay. You adjust your mask. The interior is in disarray. Velvet curtains drawn, rugs rolled up, chairs pushed against walls. A makeshift bed in the parlor holds an elderly man. His breathing is shallow. His chest rattles. Another figure sits beside him, a woman in fine robes, hands trembling as she dips a cloth in wine and touches it to his forehead. You learn quickly that the man is Lord Emilius, retired magistrate and minor poet. The woman is his daughter. The girl is her daughter in turn. 3 generations under one roof, all touched by the sickness. Mainstream historical fact. The Black Death did not discriminate. It tore through households high and low, often hitting noble families just as brutally. Whole family lines were wiped out in weeks, their estates left to rot or seized by neighbors and city officials. You examine the old man first. His symptoms are advanced. Buboes in the groin, already blackened, gums bleeding, fever beyond speech. You make note, but say little. There's nothing to be done. The daughter asks about the girl. You turn to her. She's warm, but not burning, no visible swellings. Her breathing is clear. Perhaps spared, you say. The mother doesn't look relieved, just tired. You offer your usual care, a small dose of vinegar, a poultice made from mashed figs and onion, a tincture of crushed emerald, ineffective but requested often. You leave it all behind. As you prepare to leave, the girl speaks for the first time. They say your mask eats souls. You pause. She's staring at you, unblinking. You tilt your head slightly. Do they? She nods. They say when you wear it, you steal the last breath of the dying. You crouch beside her, careful to keep your gloves from brushing her skin. I wear it to stay safe, you say quietly, not to steal anything. She studies the mask. But you always walk away. That one hangs in the air. It's true. You do always walk away. Quirky tidbit. Some plague doctors were rumored to be supernatural, agents of death, or even summoned demons. Folk tales from rural villages often depicted them as faceless men who floated above the ground and marked homes for the grave. You leave the house with the girl's words curled tight in your chest. Back in the square, a crowd is gathered, not panicking, just watching. A man is nailing a list to the church door. Names, dozens of them. You recognize some? Shopkeepers, singers, a boy who used to race pigeons for coins. You move past without reading more. But someone grabs your sleeve. It's a woman, middle-aged, hands calloused from soap-making. She stares at you like she's trying to decide if you're real. Is it true, she whispers, that it comes on the wind now? You don't know what to say. You've heard the rumors. People in homes with sealed doors still falling sick. The plague jumping streets without a carrier. Whole blocks going quiet overnight. Historians still argue whether airborne transmission played a role in certain outbreaks of the plague. Some claim the speed of infection in dense cities points to more than just fleas or touch. Others argue it was panic and poor sanitation that gave the illusion of airborne death. You tell her the safest answer: stay inside, burn herbs, avoid the sick. She nods, not convinced, just resigned. That's the thing. People aren't afraid anymore. Not really. They're tired. And that's somehow worse. You continue your rounds, but it feels different today. You feel eyes on your back at every turn. Someone spits near your boots. Another makes a sign against evil as you pass. You're no longer just a doctor. You're the grim shape in the corner of every plague dream. You are their dread made flesh. By the time you return home, the sun is low, and the air carries that end-of-day hush. You remove your mask and stare at it. The beak is stained at the tip. A small feather, caught from a mattress maybe, clings to the leather. You light a candle. You sit beside it, and you wonder, not for the first time, what people will say of you when this is over. Will they remember you as a healer, or just the thing that showed up when death was near? You don't open your windows anymore. You used to, back in the early days, when you still believed fresh air might help, when people still stood in doorways to sing or bang pots or offer each other hope. But now the wind feels like it carries something sharp, invisible, cruel. This morning it carries smoke. You wake to the scent of it, bitter and dry, not hearth smoke. No, this is something harsher. You pull on your gloves, your robe, your mask, and you step outside. The eastern quarter is burning, not wildly, not uncontrolled, but deliberately. Row by row, houses are being set alight. Some still full of furniture, others already marked with the white cross of quarantine. Officials in leather aprons and cloth-wrapped faces oversee it. You watch a man toss a lit torch into a window with the dispassion of someone feeding a fire pit. It's not the first time, but it's the largest mainstream historical fact. During major plague outbreaks, cities sometimes resorted to burning entire sections to control infection, especially densely packed, poor neighborhoods. It was a last-ditch tactic, rarely effective, often devastating, and usually more about optics than results. A clerk you vaguely recognize approaches you. His robes are scorched at the hem. "We're starting the block culling," he says, almost casually. "Magistrates approved it last night." You say nothing. What is there to say? They're not killing people directly, of course, just neutralizing places deemed unsalvageable. Some homes were already empty, others not so much. Rumors swirl of occupants too weak to flee or hidden children forgotten in the rush. You don't know if they're true. You don't want to know. You make your way to the cordon, where smoke blurs the line between the untouched city and the sacrifice. A woman wails from behind a makeshift barricade. She shouts a name, over and over, until her voice cracks. No one answers. Someone offers you a damp cloth for your mask. You decline. The smell is in your bones now. As you leave, you hear a soldier joke that plague is cheaper than war. You don't laugh. The next house you visit is low stone, half hidden behind ivy. A baker's residence. You recall his almond cakes, once sold on crisp mornings when the air still smelled like cinnamon and boiled wine. He's gone now. His wife remains. She sits beside her son, 10, maybe 11. The boy is flushed, soaked in sweat, and breathing like he's underwater. The mother is calm, too calm. You realize, as you examine the boy, that she's already said goodbye. She just hasn't left yet. You apply a vinegar compress. You leave a small cloth of lavender near his head, though the scent does little. She thanks you softly. Then, before you go, she hands you a folded note. You read it later. It's a recipe for almond cakes, handwritten, smudged with tears. Quirky tidbit. In some plague-affected regions, food recipes were exchanged as parting gifts, small hopeful tokens meant to preserve memory. When this ends, people would say, make this and think of me. You tuck the recipe into your coat. That evening, you don't go home. Instead, you visit the chapel of St. Radegund, tucked behind the older walls of the city, where the stone smells like damp parchment and incense never quite fades. The doors are open, though no mass is held. Not anymore. Inside, a few silent figures kneel in scattered pews. No words, just presence. You find a quiet spot near a pillar and sit. You don't pray. Not exactly. You think about the girl who accused your mask of eating souls, about the scholar dissecting rats in his study, about the baker's wife who gave you her last recipe instead of begging you to save her child. And you wonder how much longer this city can stretch before it tears. Historians still argue whether burning plague houses was ever remotely effective. Some believe it reduced vermin populations temporarily. Others argue it simply displaced infection, pushing the sick into new quarters and spreading it further. Either way, it was often more spectacle than solution. The city smells of ash for days. Your robe picks it up, traps it in the folds. Even after scrubbing, the scent lingers like guilt. Soon, you start noticing more missing windows. People have boarded them up, nailed shutters from the inside. Some have written scripture over the wood in chalk. Others have painted symbols, eyes, stars, protective circles. Superstition has grown teeth. Children once played in the alleys. Now, you see them only behind curtains, and yet, somehow, you are still expected to show up. One morning, A small envelope arrives at your quarters, wax seal, no return mark. Inside is a single line. If we burn what's infected, what's left of us? No name. You reread it several times. You tuck it next to the almond cake recipe. That day, you're called to a tailor shop near the markets. The owner is gaunt, coughing blood, but lucid. He makes a strange request. He wants to be measured. For what? You ask. My burial, he replies. He insists. You do it. You take the measurements. He smiles weakly. Use good thread. You promise nothing. And yet, when he dies that evening, you take a scrap of clean linen and fold it carefully. You place it in a drawer, maybe for him, maybe for you. That night, your dreams shift. You no longer see bodies. You see fire, roofs collapsing, smoke pouring through streets, a child clutching a recipe book, a priest ringing a bell no one hears. And standing in the middle of it all, you, unburnt, still wearing the mask, still watching. You wake with a sensation that something has changed. Not a sound exactly, more like an absence. The sort of hush that falls when a storm finishes its tantrum but hasn't quite left. You sit up slowly, joints stiff from another night curled on the floor. Your cot was moved weeks ago to make room for drying herbs. You barely notice anymore. Outside, the city doesn't stir. You slip into your robes, careful with the inner layers. Everything has to be sealed just so. A lapse, even a small one, could mean a bubo blooming on your own flesh within days. The mask is last. You fasten it, then open the door. There's fog, not mist, not smoke, just a deep, honest fog rolling in from the river. It curls around the cobblestones and hugs the lampposts like a cat that doesn't want to be seen. You step into it, boots wet almost immediately, and begin your rounds. You pass a fountain where the water has gone still and green. A boy once washed his pigeons here. He died weeks ago. You turn onto Copper Street and find a surprise. A market stall, not just abandoned crates or overturned carts. A functioning stall with goods, dried apples, small cheeses, 2 loaves of bread so pale they look like memory. A woman stands behind the table. She wears gloves, no mask. You approach, carefully. Is it safe, you ask? She shrugs. Safer than starving. Mainstream historical fact. In many plague-stricken cities, underground or informal markets sprang up, often run by widows, orphans, or those too desperate to wait for normal trade to return. These ghost markets operated at odd hours, in foggy alleys or under bridges, and were both lifeline and liability. You ask the price of the bread. It's high. You pay anyway. Not for yourself, you rarely eat, but for a boy on Silk Row whose mother can no longer stand. She once stitched your robes. You owe her that. As you continue, the fog thickens. By the time you reach the apothecary, you can barely see your own feet. The bell above the door doesn't ring. It's been removed. No one wants noise now. Inside, the shelves are mostly bare. The apprentice, just 16, greets you with a nod. His master passed 2 weeks ago. He's running the place alone now. You ask for mustard seed, dried sage, and brimstone. He hesitates at the last item. Why? He asks, voice low. For the bishop's house, you say. That's enough. He packs it. Quirky tidbit. Brimstone, or sulfur, was widely believed to purify air and spaces during plagues. Some physicians even recommended burning it under beds. though it often resulted in sore throats, hallucinations, or singed eyebrows. You leave a coin behind that he doesn't try to refuse. Outside, you hear laughter. You pause. It's faint, but real. Someone is laughing in this city, in this fog. You follow the sound. It leads you to a courtyard behind a tannery where 3 children are playing with sticks and rags fashioned into crude marionettes. They've made a plague doctor doll, beaked and floppy, and are making it dance across a makeshift stage. One of them gives it a squeaky voice. "Oh, I'm here to check your lymph node." The others giggle. You lean silently against the wall and watch. They don't notice you at first. Then the youngest does. She freezes, points. The laughter stops. You lift your hand, just a slow wave. The plague doctor puppet bows. You nod back, then disappear into the fog. Historians still argue whether plague survivors were psychologically hardened or permanently scarred. Some records describe cities springing back with astonishing resilience. Others depict generations traumatized by the memory of cartwheels over cobblestone and the stench of burning sage. You find yourself walking without destination. It's rare to have a stretch of time without an appointment, no dying merchant, no fevered housemaid, no quarrel over the validity of pustule size. You take advantage. You pass the old university, shuttered. Its arches now home to rats and cats and 2 silent nuns who sweep the steps daily out of habit or prayer. One of them nods at you. You nod back. Around midday, the fog thins enough to let through a smear of sun. You find yourself near the river, where the ferrymen used to shout and jostle. Now, the docks are empty, save for a single skiff tied loosely to a post. A man sits inside it, carving something into the wood with a short blade. You watch him for a moment. He looks up. His eyes widen. You realize he thinks you're death. You back away slowly. No words, just mist between you. That evening, you return home and unmask slowly. The room is quiet. A single candle burns low. You look at the table. It's covered in scraps, recipes, measurements, scribbled notes from the scholars who no longer write. A dried sprig of rosemary, a child's drawing of your mask, a button from the coat of the man who requested burial measurements. Things that don't belong together. Things that only you have touched in weeks. You sit, you stare, and finally, because the air feels strange and the silence feels heavy, you speak aloud. Is this still medicine? No one answers. But outside, somewhere in the fog, the children are still laughing. And for a moment, you let yourself hope that laughter might be catching. You dream of birds again, not pigeons or doves, but black-winged shapes swirling in spirals above the city, silent and too large, as if carved from night itself. Their wings beat without sound. You reach up to them, maybe to ask a question, maybe just to be lifted away, and they vanish. You wake with your fingers curled in air. Morning comes slow. The fog has cleared, but the quiet remains, as though the whole city is holding its breath. You dress automatically, layer by layer. Your mask stares at you from its hook like an old friend who no longer tells you the truth. You fasten it anyway. The air outside smells faintly of lavender. Someone, somewhere, is still boiling herbs. Your first visit is to a midwife. She asked for you 3 days ago in a note written with a shaking hand and sealed with wax shaped like a sunflower. You had to wait. There were others, always others. But now you make your way to her small cottage tucked behind the mill. She is dying. She knows it. You know it. But she greets you warmly, her eyes sharp despite the fever. "I wanted to ask," she says between shallow breaths, "what happens to the babies?" You pause. She clarifies, "The ones born during all this, or the ones about to be." You don't have a good answer, because there are babies, a few. Somehow, even in this mess, life insists on showing up. Mainstream historical fact. During major plague years, midwives remained in high demand, often forced to assist even as their own health deteriorated. Their work was dangerous, intimate, and sometimes punished, particularly if infants died, leading to whispered accusations of witchcraft. The midwife chuckles when you say as much. "Oh, yes," she croaks. "Witch, hag, crone, all the usual names." She coughs, but it ends in a smile. You ask if she wants anything for the pain. "Just one story," she says. "Any story." So you tell her about the children with the puppet show, about the tiny plague doctor voice, and the bow it made. She laughs softly, eyes damp. "That's a good one to go out on," she whispers. She doesn't ask you to stay, but you do, until her breathing stops. Outside, a neighbor watches from across the lane, eyes wide and cautious. You nod once. She nods back. No words. You add a sunflower to your coat pocket. They're stacking up. Later that day, you're summoned to a noble's house on Bishop's Crescent. Marble pillars, manicured hedges, and a fountain that still runs. Wasteful, but no one dares cut the supply. The family is inside, all of them, parents, 3 sons, a tutor, a maid, even the cook. Only the youngest is sick. You're led to his room. The boy is 10, maybe 11, same as the baker's son. His bed is massive, all draped in velvet, but he clutches a wooden knight like any other child. The mother stands nearby. She doesn't speak, she just watches. The fever's high, buboes under the arm, slight rash on the legs. It's early. You try a few things. Wine, vinegar rub, cool cloths, a sprinkle of dried marigold in water. You've seen worse. You've lost worse. You give instructions to the maid, who writes them down carefully, knuckles white. Then the father pulls you aside. "We have a guest arriving tonight," he says stiffly. "A physician from Venice. He has a new method. You know the type. Leeches? Fire blistering? A paste made from crushed emeralds?" "I understand," you say, though you don't. Venetian physicians were revered, sure. Their beaked masks were inspired by French designs, but they added flair. Sometimes actual gold leaf. They brought remedies and rumors in equal measure. You leave the boy's room. You don't expect to be invited back. Quirky tidbit. Venetian plague doctors occasionally carried syringes built into their canes for injecting herbal oils or even mercury under the skin, a practice that was both theatrical and deeply questionable in effect. Outside, the wind kicks up. You make your way to the southern gate, where the guards are arguing over a new visitor. A peddler from the countryside wants entry. He claims to be plague-free. Offers goods, pine resin, salt, 2 chickens. He's denied. Too dangerous. You watch him slump to the ground, hat in hand. He doesn't argue, just waits. As if patience alone might open the gates, it won't. You move on. As you walk, the streets feel tired, not dead, not yet, but worn. The stones sag, the shutters droop. Even the bells ring with less conviction. Historians still argue whether medieval cities could truly recover between waves of plague or if they merely paused between punishments. Populations sometimes halved, recovered, then halved again within decades. Some villages never returned at all. You pause at an intersection where someone's chalked a message on the wall. It reads, "Don't touch the cats." You chuckle, gently. Sensibly, rats carry fleas. Fleas carry plague. But at the time, many blamed cats and dogs. Ironically, the killing of cats may have worsened outbreaks. You pat a stray tabby on the head. It purrs. Sorry, history. That night, you return home to something new. A letter slid under your door. No seal, just your name written carefully. Inside, one sentence. Do you still believe in anything? You stare at the words until the candle gutters. Do you? You believed in medicine, in preparation, in the authority of robes and beaks and ritual, in vinegar and sage, in flame. But now you collect sunflowers and recipes and child-drawn puppets. Now you speak stories to the dying. Now you wave at cats and nod at foggy vendors and quietly mourn each shuttered window. Maybe that's belief in its own way, not a cure, but a kind of resistance. You place the note beside the others. Then, because the night feels heavy and you want to push back against it just a little, you light a second candle. You sit beside it and wait for morning. You awaken to bells, not funeral bells. These are sharper, faster, urgent. A church nearby, St. Maudwin's if you had to guess, ringing an alarm. You haven't heard this particular cadence before. It takes a moment for your sleep-fogged brain to catch up. Fire. You're up in an instant. Boots, robes, mask, satchel. The ritual of dressing, second nature now, nearly skips a beat as you catch the glow through the window. It's faint, but unmistakable. A dull orange smear crawling up the edge of the sky. You head out, feet moving before your mind is ready. Smoke bites the air long before you reach the street. You aren't the only one out. People move like insects, dazed and slow. Some carry buckets. Others just stand and stare, mouths open, as if shocked that something other than plague could threaten their homes. But fire doesn't care about context. It doesn't respect pandemics or piety. It just is. The source is a tenement near the edge of the butcher's quarter. 3 floors. Old timber, bad luck. By the time you arrive, it's already roaring. The crowd swells. Dozens now, maybe hundreds, despite the plague. There's something about fire that unites people, even if only for a moment. You see men handing off buckets in a ragged line, women screaming names into the dark, a priest kneeling in the mud whispering a prayer you can't quite hear. You're not here to fight flames. You're here for the aftermath. Mainstream historical fact. Fires during the plague weren't uncommon. Overcrowded housing, open flames, and reduced maintenance turned cities into tinderboxes. Some historians speculate that certain outbreaks may have ended more quickly due to buildings literally burning the disease away. You duck into the smoke when a mother screams her daughter's name. A neighbor points. Top floor. Against your better judgment, you move. Inside, the stairs are already gone. You make it halfway up the first flight before the heat punches you in the chest. You grab the railing, immediately regret it, and pivot back out. You've seen too many die of burns that infected in days. You're not adding your name to the list. Outside, someone else has the girl, a boy, maybe 16, face streaked with soot, holding her like a sack of grain. She's coughing, but alive. The crowd lets out a sound you haven't heard in weeks. Cheering. It's brief, but it's real. You stand in the smoke a moment longer, chest tight, eyes stinging, not just from the heat. Then you disappear. Later, you stop by the canal. Your robes are scorched at the edge. You dip your hands, still gloved, into the water, letting the filth swirl around your fingers like regret. You've lost count of how many times you've washed this way. Soap is a luxury, and the apothecaries hoard what they have. But still, you scrub. Habit mostly. Hope, partly. You think about the girl in the fire, about the boy who ran in, about why he did it. Quirky tidbit. In some cities, volunteer fire brigades were made up of teen boys too young to be conscripted for plague work. Their bravery made them local legends, until the next wave came and carried them off anyway. You wonder if that boy will live to see autumn. You wonder if you will. You continue your route. Your next stop is a bathhouse that's been converted into a triage station. Not official, just a place with hot water and cots and a few people stubborn enough to offer help. You enter through the back, less crowded. Inside, steam fogs your lenses. The room smells of lavender oil and boiled towels. A woman in her 30s, hair tied back with twine, hands you a basin. "We lost 3, she says. "One's maybe recovering." You nod. Familiar math. You kneel by the survivor, a weaver's apprentice, gaunt and glassy-eyed. He blinks at you, murmurs something about his mother's cat. You spoon broth into his mouth. He swallows. Small victories. Historians still argue whether bathhouses helped or hurt during plague years. Some insist hot water and steam aided recovery. Others point to their crowded nature and lack of sterilization, arguing they only sped up the spread. You leave him sleeping. Outside, the sky shifts. Evening coming on. Shadows lengthen. And then you hear music. Not a hallucination, not a trick of wind. Real music. A pipe, faint and reedy, followed by a tambourine, then laughter, actual laughter, floating down from a rooftop. You glance up. A gathering. 4 or 5 figures, seated in a circle, one with a lute, another drumming softly on a bucket. Someone's dancing, arms raised, body swaying, back lit by the last gold of the sun. You stare. They're not sick. They're not mourning. They're just celebrating. You don't interrupt. You just stand there a while, letting the music wash over you like the canal never could. Later, at home, you remove your mask slowly. You run your fingers along the edge of the beak, cracked now, stained permanently near the base. You don't fix it. Instead, you take out the note again. "Do you still believe in anything?" "Tonight." You write a reply. No seal, no name. Just this. Yes, but only in small things. You slip it out your window, let the breeze take it. It might land in the river, or the market, or some child's puppet show stage. Wherever it goes, it's enough. You light a candle. Place it on the sill. Then sit beside it as darkness rises, waiting not for miracles, but for morning. Your dreams are quieter now, not peaceful. This isn't that kind of life, but quieter. No flames, no birds, just the sound of water dripping, steady as a heartbeat, and the faint echo of footsteps you can't quite catch. You rise before the sun. There's a chill. the kind that clings to the stone and hangs in the folds of your robe. You stretch your fingers, flex the ache from your knuckles, and begin the ritual. Robe, gloves, mask, satchel, everything in its place. A moving shrine of routine. Outside, the streets are hushed. It's not just the early hour. Something else hangs in the air today, thicker than fog, quieter than dread. You pass two men hauling a wheelbarrow full of bricks. Neither speaks. One nods. You nod back. You know what that means. Someone's rebuilding, not mourning, not fleeing, not abandoning. Rebuilding. Your first stop is an old abbey, or what's left of it. The monks are long gone. Most succumbed early in the first wave, but the building has become a sort of communal holding space. Today, it houses a half-dozen sick and a few more who might just be starving. The line between fever and famine is razor thin now. A boy greets you at the door, maybe 12. Smudged face, bent glasses, hands covered in soot. "I boiled the water like you said," he chirps. You glance at the bucket, still steaming. The kid's doing more than some adults. Mainstream historical fact. During plagues, monasteries and abbeys often became makeshift hospitals. With clergy dying in large numbers, local children and untrained volunteers sometimes filled the void, doing everything from sweeping to spoon-feeding the dying. Inside, the abbey smells of smoke, urine, and time. You check each patient, adjusting wraps, murmuring instructions, replacing vinegar cloths. One old man clutches your wrist suddenly. "You're not death," he rasps. You shake your head. "Just his very tired intern," you whisper. He laughs. It turns into a cough. You pat his shoulder until it subsides. You leave him with a smile. Outside, the boy walks you back to the street. "Is it almost over?" he asks. You look at him, at the smoke-black fingers, the knees poking through his pants, the light in his eyes that refuses to dim. "I don't know," you say honestly, "but you're still here." That seems to satisfy him. He waves as you go. You don't wave back. Your hands are too dirty. Your next stop is the quarry. A strange place for a plague doctor, but a message was sent, scribbled hastily, pinned to a stray goat wandering the street. You're still not sure how that delivery system worked. The quarry is on the edge of town. It's half active now, with only a few workers hauling stone. Not for buildings, they're carving new markers. Graves come faster than ink can record. You meet a man named Joram. Huge, weathered, quiet. "I thought I had it," he says without preamble. "Fever, black sore, whole deal." You wait. But it passed. He shows you a dark bruise under his ribs. Old now, healing. "I wanted to talk to someone about it." You nod slowly. People need that, just to be witnessed, to say, "I suffered and someone saw me do it." You ask if he's afraid it might come back. He shrugs. "Maybe, but I had a dream. A good one." You raise an eyebrow, though he can't see it through the mask. "I dreamed I was building something huge, bigger than this town. People from everywhere helping me stack stones. No plague, just music and birds that didn't scare me. Quirky tidbit. In some medieval towns, people who survived the plague were believed to be touched, not cursed, but marked. Survivors were often turned to for blessings or wisdom, their bodies thought to carry secrets of protection. Some even believe their blood held curative properties. You tell Joram this. He grins. So I'm magic now? Don't let it go to your head, you say. You leave him still chuckling. Back in the city, there's something new on the wall. Chalk again. A crude drawing. Stick figures holding hands. Above it, still here. You pause. A breeze rustles your robe. Still here. You let the words sink in. Historians still argue whether medieval communities developed psychological resilience during successive plague waves, or if each outbreak eroded trust, compassion, and memory. The truth, as always, is probably both. You move on, toward the baker's quarter. The air smells faintly of flour and ash. Some of the ovens are working again, not all, but enough to remind you that bread still exists. You find the boy again, the one who showed you the puppet doctor. He's chalking a game onto the street, some sort of hop pattern. Want to try? He asks. You hesitate. He laughs. Right, mask. You pretend to consider, then lift one foot carefully and hop to the first square. He cheers. Then you both laugh. It's a sound that feels strange now. Foreign. Like a song you used to know but forgot how to hum. You watch him jump twice, land, then twirl. Is it true, he asks between jumps, that rats started all this? You give him the usual story. Fleas, black rats, grain ships from the east. He nods solemnly. That's why I started feeding owls. You blink. You what? Owls, he repeats. They eat rats. So I figured, more owls, less plague. You want to argue the science, but honestly, it's as good a theory as any. That evening, you hear the bells again, but not for death. It's the market bell. Someone's opened a stall. You drift toward the sound. Sure enough, a small table stands in the square. Cloth spread neatly, goods stacked, garlic, onions, 2 tiny wedges of cheese, a few sprigs of rosemary. The vendor is ancient. Skin like bark, eyes like coal. She sees you. Doctor, she says with a nod. Madam, you reply. Today I trade only in herbs and truths, she says. Which do you need? You smile. I've got enough herbs. She nods once, solemnly, then hands you a sprig of rosemary anyway. Take it, for remembering. You accept, because why not? That night, as you write in your notebook, the rosemary sits in a glass beside you, soaking up moonlight like it belongs there. You think about the old man in the abbey, the boy in the quarry, the child and his owls. You think about how ridiculous and sacred it is that people are still playing games, baking bread, planting chalk drawings. Still here, still here, still here. You fall asleep whispering it like a charm, like a prayer. You wake to the sound of rain, not a storm. Not the kind that floods or drowns, just a soft, steady drizzle tapping the window and trickling down the rooftops. It's the first real rain in weeks, and it smells like relief. Damp wood, wet stone, and something green trying desperately to grow. You open your shutters just a crack. The street below is slick and quiet. The dust has settled. The air feels heavier, but cleaner. No smoke today, no fire, just puddles and the faint scent of life. You lean against the frame and breathe. For a moment, you imagine you're somewhere else, anywhere else. But then the coughing begins again. 3 houses down. Familiar, wet, and rattling. That kind of cough stays with you. You reach for your gloves. Rain or not, the work doesn't stop. Your first visit of the day is to a midwife named Lisette. She's one of the rare ones. Still practicing, still moving from house to house, still catching babies in the middle of a plague. You've heard her called reckless, brave, mad. You're not sure those are different things anymore. When you arrive, she's already elbow-deep in work. A young woman lies on a pallet, eyes wide, soaked in sweat. Her breath comes in sharp huffs, and her husband is pacing like a caged dog in the next room. Lisette doesn't look up. "Glad you came," she mutters. "I need you to keep him from fainting." Mainstream historical fact. Despite the danger, childbirth didn't pause during plague years. Midwives were often the only medical presence available for birthing mothers, even as priests and physicians refused to enter infected homes. Some historians believe midwives' survival rates were higher due to simpler tools and cleaner hands, whether by habit or scarcity. You step in, glancing at the husband. "Go boil water," you say, and find something for her to bite down on. He obeys, grateful for direction. You turn back to the woman. She's trembling now. Lisette locks eyes with you. "Ready?" she asks. You nod, and then it begins. Birth is messy in the best of times. During a plague, it's something between miracle and madness. You do what you can. Wipe her brow, hold her hand, speak softly, even when her screams rise above the rain outside. And then, suddenly, blessedly, it's over. A baby's cry fills the room, tiny, alive, loud. Lisette wraps the child, eyes shining. You glance at the mother, pale, exhausted, but still breathing. You step outside and let the rain wash your gloves. You don't cry, but you come close. "Girl!" Lisette calls from behind. "Strong one!" You nod, then slip away before anyone can ask you to stay longer. The next house is less joyful. 3 bodies covered in linen. A woman sits alone beside them, eyes fixed on a rosary that's missing half its beads. You kneel quietly. She doesn't flinch. "They died yesterday," she says, "all of them, by morning." You uncover each one, inspect briefly, then recover. Sometimes all you can offer is presence. Quirky tidbit. In parts of rural Europe, mourners believed that rain during death signified safe passage. They'd place bowls outside to catch the water, then use it to anoint the deceased's hands before burial, a kind of natural benediction. You step back into the rain. Your robe clings to your legs. You don't complain. Later, you pass by the puppet boy again. He's under an awning, painting tiny masks onto wooden figures. Today, they wear long coats and comically large noses. He holds one up. "This one's you." You squint. It's not entirely inaccurate. He adds, "I named it Sir Stinky Beak." You chuckle. Well, Sir Stinky Beak appreciates the tribute. He gives you the puppet. You accept it. "Payment?" you ask. He shrugs. "Keep doing your job." You tuck the little puppet into your satchel, nestled among herbs and gloves. A talisman now. You walk a little lighter. The rain slows by midday, leaving the streets glossy and quiet. You pass a well where someone has left flowers, damp, drooping daisies, pushed through the cracks in the stone. No note, just a gesture. You keep walking, down toward the far edge of the village, where the path turns to mud and the homes are fewer. There's a woman here, lives alone. You've checked on her before. Widow, deaf in one ear, keeps goats. When she sees you, she smiles. "I made something," she says, and beckons you into her cottage. Inside, the fire crackles. Warm bread on the table, a pot of something herbal steaming gently. But it's the corner that catches your eye. A cloak, hung neatly. It's not black. It's deep blue, like dusk. She gestures to it. For you, when the plague's over, you run a gloved hand along the hem. The fabric is soft, sturdy. It might be a while, you murmur. I've waited before, she says. You leave with a full satchel and a lump in your throat. Historians still argue whether communities truly rallied in the face of plague, or whether these moments of kindness were rare exceptions. Some records describe neighbor turning on neighbor, while others preserve tales of profound generosity. Truth walks somewhere between. By evening, the rain has stopped. The clouds break. And just like that, you see stars again. Real ones, not torchlight, not candles, just sky, vast and ink blue. You remove your mask beneath the archway of a chapel long since abandoned. For a moment, you stand in the open air, face bare, tasting the night. No screams, no bells, just frogs and wind. You think about Lisette, catching babies by candlelight, the widow, stitching hope into a cloak, the puppet boy, carving heroes from scraps, and the chalk drawing, still here. You think maybe you're not just surviving anymore. Maybe, just maybe, you're living a little too. A tiny, rebellious thing. But it counts. You sleep without nightmares. That in itself feels suspicious, like a trap. But morning comes gently. No smoke, no bells. Just bird song and the soft crackle of the fire someone lit under your hearth. You don't remember lighting it. Maybe it was the boy, or the wind, or some benevolent ghost that got tired of your stubborn cold feet. You stretch. The soreness in your shoulders is still there, a dull ache earned honestly. You think of it as a tax. Pay it each day in full. Today feels different. Not better, exactly, but calmer, like something has passed. You dress slower. The usual layers, linen, leather, beak. But today, you pause before pulling the mask down. Just for a second, you meet your reflection in the water basin. Eyes tired, but alive. Still here. You begin with a walk toward the square. The chalk is back. More drawings. Little people, animals, strange shapes. A flower, lopsided but hopeful. One house has hearts painted all across its shutters, each one a different shade of brown and black and red. Someone's used mud and ash and maybe old wine. No one bothers to scrub it off. In fact, 2 more have added their own. It's starting to look like a mural. You stop at a small bakery, or what used to be a bakery. The ovens haven't worked in months, but the front window is still intact. A woman named Bertha lives here now, with her 3 children. You've checked on them before. Fevers, sores, now faded. Today, she meets you with a bowl. I made stew, she says. You tilt your head. It's not plague stew, she adds. Promise. You smile behind the mask. You sit on the step and eat. The children peek around the doorway. One offers you a piece of wood painted with a sun. You take it and tuck it in beside her stinky beak. You're collecting things, Bertha says, watching. You glance at your satchel, a puppet, a painted sun, a sprig of rosemary, one frayed ribbon, a stone carved with a name. Yeah, you say, I guess I am. Mainstream historical fact. In times of crisis, people often held on to small personal tokens, charms, ribbons, even bones or fragments of cloth. These weren't magical in the traditional sense, but they were believed to ward off despair, to root people in memory and survival. You keep walking. The butcher's corner is empty today. No surprise, really. He's run out of animals. But someone's left an offering in the old trough. Apples, shriveled and brown, but still apples. You take one and leave the stone with the name on it in return. That's how things work now. Quiet exchanges, no contracts, just trust. You take a different route this time, one that cuts behind the chapel down toward the old mill. You rarely come this way. It's half collapsed, the river underneath choked with branches and silt. No one mills anything anymore. But someone's there today. A girl, maybe 16, is balancing on the edge of the mill wheel, arms spread wide like wings. You freeze. She sees you and grins. "Don't worry," she calls. "I'm not jumping." You raise a hand. A cautious wave. "I just like the height," she says, stepping carefully. "I pretend it's the ocean. I've never seen one." You nod, understanding. Pretending is vital now, more precious than medicine. She sits and dangles her legs. "I lost my parents 3 weeks ago," she says without preamble, "and my uncle last month." You wait. "I thought I'd feel empty, but I don't. I feel sharp, like my body's full of needles." Quirky tidbit. Medieval people often described grief as a physical sensation, heaviness of the chest, fire in the head, numbness in the hands. Some believed sorrow could literally weigh the soul and needed to be bled out or sung away in order to heal. "I sing sometimes," she continues, "but it sounds wrong now." You ask if she wants you to listen. She shakes her head. "Not yet. Maybe when the birds come back." You sit at the edge of the ruined path and share the apple. She takes one bite and hands it back. "Too soft," she says. You smile. "Next time I'll bring a pear." "You'd better," she says, and turns back to the river. You leave quietly. Back in the square, more people have gathered. A makeshift stall is up. Someone selling cloth scraps, mismatched buttons, and something that looks like a cracked mirror. It's utterly useless, and somehow priceless. You buy a red button, not because you need it, because someone needed to sell it. You add it to the collection. Sir Stinky Beak looks impressed. Later that afternoon, you meet a priest by the city gates. Not your usual fire and brimstone type. This one's young, with freckles and a nose that looks recently broken. He's organizing something. "A prayer circle?" You ask, suspicious. He laughs. "Nope, a foot race." You blink. "Seriously? We're calling it the Flee the Plague Relay." You stare. He shrugs. "We figured we'd lean into it." You end up watching from a safe distance as 10 kids line up. One is barefoot. One wears 2 left shoes. Another has a stick for a baton. On go, they run like the wind, or at least like squirrels chasing each other across rooftops. They whoop and laugh and stumble and sprint. You find yourself cheering. Someone hands you a flag. You wave it with exactly the amount of enthusiasm allowed by your plague doctor dignity. Medium. The priest ends it with a bow and hands out treats. Dried figs, 1 per participant. They act like it's a feast. Historians still argue whether plague-era festivities were acts of resistance or denial. Some towns held processions, games, or symbolic celebrations even during outbreaks, often facing backlash from church or crown. But others argue The joy was its own medicine, a way to declare, we are not dead yet. You stay until the sun begins to dip. One of the kids, muddy, breathless, salutes you dramatically. Doctor wins best hat. You nod gravely. About time someone noticed. That evening, you stop by the Abbey again. The boy is still there. He's made a chart, drawn in coal, of how many people have lived, how many passed, and how many he thinks are still sick. It's wildly inaccurate, but it's neat. It's effort. He points to the lived column. You're in here twice, he says. Why? Once for saving me, once for not leaving. You say nothing. But you stay a little longer. You light a candle before you go. For no one in particular. Just because. As you walk home, the sky turns gold, then blue, then that strange velvet shade that never lasts more than a few minutes. You pass by the mural again. Someone's drawn a bird. It's flying, and it's not on fire. That feels important. That feels earned. It's market day, or what's left of it. Once, that meant carts and color and shouting, baskets of fruit piled too high, eels wriggling in buckets, and the impossible scent of cinnamon drifting from stalls like magic. Today, it's 3 tables, 1 dog, and a woman trying to sell shoes that very obviously don't match. But there's something about it, something brave. People are showing up, hesitantly sure. They keep their distance, but they show. You hover at the edge, watching. You recognize a few faces. The baker's wife, the bell ringer's cousin, that one man who sells pickled vegetables even though no one's ever seen where he gets them. He's back, offering turnips that smell faintly like sadness. You walk past, scanning for signs of illness. Red cheeks, glassy eyes. No one looks too close to collapse, which is promising. The shoemaker waves you over. Doctor, she says, do you think I could catch the plague from a goat? You pause. Were you kissing the goat? She laughs. No, it just sneezed on me. You do your best to reassure her. Goats can get sick, but they're not exactly known plague spreaders. She offers you a shoe in thanks, just one. You take it anyway. Mainstream historical fact. In plague-era towns, many markets shut down entirely, but some adapted with social distancing measures that feel eerily familiar. Coins were soaked in vinegar. Goods were exchanged on long poles. Some stalls had windows cut into the front, allowing interaction with minimal risk. You trade your red button for a honeyed plum. It's not fresh, but it's sweet, and you savor it slowly under a willow tree by the edge of the square. The puppet boy finds you there. He's made another figure. This one has wings. She's a flying midwife, he explains. She delivers babies in the sky and drops them down chimneys. That's terrifying, you say. He beams. You ask if he's had lunch. He shakes his head. You hand him the plum core. He flips it in the air and says, "Now, this is treasure," then scampers off. You lie back on the grass for a minute, staring through the branches. You've started counting birds again. 3 so far. 1 robin, 2 sparrows. You take it as a good sign. A bell rings in the distance. Not a death knell. This one's lighter, celebratory. You follow the sound to a house you've visited before. 2 children are sitting outside with streamers made of dried reeds. Inside, their mother is upright, talking, eating soup. You remember when she couldn't lift her head. "Doctor," she says, her voice still rasped, but warm. "I've decided not to die after all." You smile. "That's very thoughtful of you." She lifts a wooden spoon like a scepter. "Now, I'm queen of this street. You curtsy. They give you a slice of bread, too small to be generous but too big to refuse. You eat it like it's gold. Quirky tidbit. There are documented cases of plague survivors declaring themselves saints, kings, or prophets, usually playfully, occasionally seriously. One Milanese woman survived and insisted she now had healing powers granted by angels. Historians still debate if she was revered or institutionalized. As you leave, you pass a boy drawing circles on the wall with charcoal. What are those, you ask? He shrugs. People, but with no arms. You nod, like that explains everything. At mid-afternoon, a commotion breaks out near the well. Two vendors are shouting. Someone accused someone of stealing dried figs. You're tempted to walk away, but people look to you now. Somehow, you've become the town's default authority figure. Settle it with dice, you say, not because that's wise, but because it's fast. They do. The loser grumbles, the winner hands over the figs, and everyone relaxes. You didn't learn that in medical school. But then again, you didn't learn about plague puppets or sky midwives either. You stop by Lisette's place. She's sewing. More babies? You ask. None today, she says. Just stitches for survivors. Everyone's fallen apart. You sit across from her and help wind thread onto spools. She glances at your collection as you pull out the shoe and the puppet. You're becoming a museum, she says. I prefer chaos bag. She reaches into her own pouch and pulls out a small brass bell. It's cracked. For the exhibit, she says. You add it to the mix. A cracked bell, a plum core, a sun painting. You're starting to feel like a scavenger of strange hope. Lisette asks if you've heard the rumor. You raise an eyebrow. They say the next town over opened their gates. You stare. Why? To start trading again. Historians still argue whether reopening during plague waves was practical or suicidal. Some towns reopened for survival's sake and were wiped out weeks later. Others held out for years and starved. There was never a right answer, just desperate guesses and dice rolls. You head to the gate before dusk. There's talk now, loud talk, of caravans, of spices, of cloth, of travel. You haven't heard that word in months. One guard is practicing his formal tone again. Welcome, noble guests. He trails off when he sees you. Too soon? He asks. You nod. Way too soon. But still, you wonder, the idea of movement, of horses and wagons and border stones, of maps and not just walls. You stare down the road. Nothing yet. But maybe soon. Back at your quarters, you light a single candle. You lay out the artifacts. Sir Stinky Beak, the winged midwife, the sun painting, the button, the cracked bell, the bread crust you couldn't bear to throw away, the shoe, the stone with a name, the ribbon, the rosemary, the tiny mirror, the frayed string you tied around your wrist the day you almost gave up. You arrange them like a shrine or an inventory of survival. You don't say a prayer. You don't need to. These are prayers. Each one says, you were here, you saw, you helped, you endured, you sit in silence. And then, carefully, you pack them away, just in case the gates do open one day, and you need to carry a little of this world with you into the next. You wake early, not to bells or screams or the knock of another desperate neighbor, but to bird song. Honest, chirpy, unapologetic bird song. For a moment, you forget. You smile before you remember why smiles are rare now. Then you remember everything. Still, you let yourself lie still, just for a minute. Then the smell hits. Not plague, not rot, not even the stale scent of damp hay and boiled nettles. It's baking bread, actual bread. Your stomach sits up before you do. You follow your nose down the lane to the bakery. The door is wide open. Someone is singing inside, and it's the baker's apprentice, a girl who's had plague scars across her face since she was 5. She's flour-dusted and radiant. "I burned the first 2 loaves," she admits. "But this one's a miracle." She hands you a corner of crust. You bite into it. And for once, you don't think about the last time you ate, or who's sick, or whether you sanitized your gloves. You just chew. She grins. "I'm reopening tomorrow," she says. "I even painted a sign. It's crooked. It says, 'We're crumb back.'" You nearly choke on your bite. Mainstream historical fact. After waves of plague receded, towns often entered what's now called the recovery phase, a time of cautious optimism where services resumed, shops reopened, and communities restructured. Guilds reformed, food markets returned, and rebuilding began, even if the shadow of the next outbreak always loomed nearby. The shoemaker has new stock. Lisette's house smells like clean linen. Someone sweeping the chapel steps, not because it's being used, but because dust feels like death. There's life again. It's timid, it limps, but it's alive. You pass a group of kids playing a game with twine and stones. One of them pauses to salute you. "Doctor, want to play?" You decline politely. Another kid says, "My uncle says you're a wizard." You raise an eyebrow. "Do I look like a wizard?" They consider. One says, "Sort of, just with fewer fireworks." Quirky tidbit. In a few towns, plague doctors, especially survivors, were mythologized. Some were believed to have supernatural immunity, divine favor, or dark powers. One 17th-century Italian village referred to their doctor as Il Mago long after he retired. You keep walking. People nod now when you pass. They don't flinch. You're still strange, still a reminder of disease, but the fear is dimmer, like a memory being gently folded away. At the square, you find the well has been scrubbed clean. Someone has painted a flower on its side, rudimentary, cheerful, bright yellow. The puppet boy is selling his figures from a blanket. He's made a whole cast now. Knights, babies, flying doctors, bread-shaped horses, and a frog with a monocle. People are buying them, laughing. You sit beside him and ask, "Got any new stories?" He thinks. "There's one where you defeat the plague by sneezing into the sun." Sounds messy, but heroic. You agree. Then you trade your last sprig of lavender for a frog. The air smells different now, less like vinegar, more like wood smoke, fresh laundry. Even the animals smell like animals again instead of doom. Lisette finds you by the fountain. She's not rushing today, just strolling. "We made it," she says. You don't answer right away. She sits beside you. "You don't have to say anything," she adds. "Just breathe." You do. You watch a toddler chase a pigeon. You hear the hum of bees. You notice a man in a clean robe helping an old woman carry firewood. No bells, no carts, just murmurs and motion. You glance at the sky. Clear. Historians still argue, Lisette begins, whether the worst was over. You smile. Of course they do, because no one ever really knows when something is truly finished. Recovery isn't a line, it's a circle. 2 steps forward, 1 back. a dance, a breath. But for now, it feels like healing. You visit the graveyard, not to inspect, not to catalog, not to mourn, just to sit. Grass has begun to grow between the stones. Someone's tied a ribbon to the gate. It flutters like it has somewhere to be. You find the grave marked with the chalk sun. It's still there, smudged but visible. You leave a plum pit beside it, the kind you used to eat when you could still taste summer. You sit for a while. You whisper, "Still here," and then you walk home, not because you must, but because you can. That night, as the stars come out again, you lie down on your cot and pull the blue cloak over your shoulders, just to see how it feels. It smells like goat, but it's warm. You hear a knock. Not a frantic one, not the knuckles-on-wood sound of someone about to collapse on your doorstep, but a polite tap-tap, like the world is slowly remembering how to ask, not beg. You open the door. It's the mayor, or what passes for a mayor now, a man with a fur hat, a sore knee, and an increasing awareness that you may actually know more about leadership than he does. He holds a scroll. "I'd like you to join the Recovery Council," he says, trying to sound official, but glancing nervously at the goat that's currently chewing your doorframe. You stare. "There's a Recovery Council?" He clears his throat. There is now. Mainstream historical fact. In many European towns after the worst of the Black Death, leadership often shifted. Survivors, especially those with medical or organizational skills, were asked to help with rebuilding. New councils emerged, old hierarchies collapsed, and power structures sometimes dramatically shifted in favor of those who'd proven competence over birthright. You accept, mostly because you suspect they'll serve food. At the first meeting, they sit you in a circle of crates. There's Lisette, the baker's apprentice, the former bell ringer, now just a guy with a loud voice, 2 monks, and the puppet boy, who insists he's representing the youth vote. Everyone's talking at once. We need more soap. We need fewer goats. We should paint every door yellow. Why? Just feels nice. You sip weak wine from a chipped mug and wait for it all to crash down. But it doesn't. They argue, sure, but they care, deeply, messily. Someone writes down ideas in charcoal on a board that used to be a cupboard door. It's chaos. But it's hopeful chaos. You suggest reassigning abandoned homes to displaced families. Lisette proposes rotating herbal gardens. The baker's apprentice suggests renaming the main road Crumb Street. It's vetoed, but only barely. Quirky tidbit. After the plague, it wasn't unusual for whole streets to be renamed or rebranded. Some towns erased the past by painting homes or changing signage. Others leaned into dark humor. There's record of a Bubo's Alley and a Saint Rat's Close in eastern France. You return from the meeting with a loaf of rye and a list of things you're now apparently in charge of. Linen distribution, bed counts, and morale. You consider the puppet boy's frog with a monocle. Morale's going to be fine. You spend the afternoon inspecting roofs, not for plague, for leaks. People are moving back into homes long sealed shut. You check chimneys, test latches, and recommend that, yes, maybe 3 raccoons in one attic is too many. You start keeping a notebook, not for symptoms, but for repairs, names, requests, plans. You draw a star next to the woman who offers to donate all her onions if someone will teach her how to pickle turnips. You draw a sun next to a boy who's building a music box from scrap metal and spoons. You draw a crooked heart beside Lisette's name. You're not sure why. You pass the chapel. The priest is sweeping again. He nods. You nod back. You wonder if either of you still believes in what's inside the chapel. But neither of you says it out loud. Historians still argue whether religious belief intensified or fractured in the wake of plague. Some survivors became fiercely devout, convinced they'd been spared by divine will. Others turned to folk magic, local mysticism, or simply walked away from formal worship entirely. You find comfort in motion, in helping rebuild the bones of your town. You mend fence posts. You plant garlic. You teach a child how to check for fever using the back of the hand. Gentle, not pressing. He says, "You smell like vinegar." You say, "You smell like milk." It's a tie. At night, you journal. You don't write about the sickness anymore. You write about bread, bees, and blankets, about the laugh Lisette makes when her thread tangles, about the painting someone added to the wall near the well, a great blue bird flying over a crooked house. You write, "Today, I felt normal. Almost." Then you write, "And then I remembered, but I kept going." You read by candlelight until the flame flickers low. You save the last line for yourself, a secret sentence only you will ever see. You sleep and dream not of death, but of lanterns, hundreds of them, floating up into the night sky. You wake to music, not a choir, not funeral bells attempting cheerfulness. Real music, lute strings and hand drums and something clacking rhythmically like spoons or bones, but in a good way. You blink the sun from your eyes and peer out your doorway. Down the street, there's a crowd, dancing. Dancing? You shuffle closer. Someone set up a makeshift stage on a cart with a curtain painted in wild green swirls and suns with smiley faces. Two musicians, a juggler, and a very confident chicken are performing for a half circle of townsfolk. A banner flaps above them. The wandering wonders return. You raise an eyebrow. Lisette appears beside you, braid slightly lopsided, holding 2 apples. She hands you one and murmurs, "They're not very good, but it's something." You take a bite. She's right, but it's sweet in a way that's not about taste. "I remember them," she says, nodding at the stage. "They passed through the year before. You know, all of it. Mainstream historical fact. Traveling performers, actors, musicians, and wonders were staples of medieval town life. After plagues, they often returned to uplift weary populations, spreading songs, stories, and very unofficial news from other towns. Their arrival was a sign that roads were safe again and laughter could be risked. The juggler drops a torch. It smacks the chicken hops dramatically and flutters into someone's stew pot. The crowd howls with laughter. The smell of roasting root vegetables wafts through the air. You feel weird. Not bad weird, just unused to this kind of weird. No one's crying. No one's scrubbing cobblestones. There's a baby somewhere making burbling noises that sound vaguely like applause. And then the juggler calls for volunteers. Before you can step back, the puppet boy shouts your name. Well, you're not a dancer or a tumbler or an actor, but you are someone who survived a horror, and maybe that earns you a little performance grace. You step forward. They hand you a mask, half sun, half moon. You slide it over your face. "Pretend to be the plague," the drummer whispers gleefully. You blink, and then you do. You lurch, you moan, you clutch your side and cough dramatically into the air. Children shriek with glee. Someone tosses a radish at you. Then the lute player, wearing a knight's paper crown, chases you off the stage yelling, "Begone, foul pestilence!" You collapse in exaggerated defeat, raising one last limp hand for effect. Applause erupts. You bow. The chicken hops back out of the pot completely unharmed and pecks at your boot. Quirky tidbit. Some traveling medieval performances included allegorical plays where the plague was personified as a monstrous villain. These often ended with characters symbolizing health, faith, or good humor defeating the illness. It was both catharsis and comedy, therapy through slapstick. Back in the crowd, Lisette's clapping with her elbows, apple juice on her chin. You sit beside her. "I'm never doing that again," you say. She says. "You were pretty good." You both lean against the fountain wall. Someone passes you a mug of broth. It's salty and strange, but warm. You sip. "I think," Lisette says slowly, "we might be okay." You don't answer right away. "Historians still argue," you say finally, "whether it really was okay after, whether the plague changed society forever, or if people just went back to being themselves." She shrugs. "Probably a little of both." You nod. Because really, what else could it be? The sky turns a buttery gold as the sun sinks. A little girl with plague scars offers you a daisy chain. You thank her. She says, "My dad says you yelled at a rat once and it exploded." You blink. Lisette snorts. "Tell him it was 2 rats," you reply. She nods gravely and runs off to spread the updated legend. You laugh, the kind that pulls something loose inside your ribs, the kind you thought you might never feel again. Night slides in. Torches are lit. The performers play softer songs now, gentle and wobbly and filled with sighs and dreams. You stay until the last ember dies, and when you finally walk home, the daisy chain still dangles from your wrist. You pass homes with candlelight flickering behind shutters. You hear snoring, humming, even a lute being quietly retuned. Life, messy, unfinished, improbably resilient life. You pause outside your door. Above it, someone's drawn a heart, crooked, in chalk. You stare at it for a long time. Then you step inside. Tomorrow, you'll check water barrels. You'll write a list. You'll help someone reattach a roof beam. You'll be a doctor and a survivor, and possibly an accidental performer with decent comic timing. But tonight, you just pull the cloak around your shoulders and whisper to the darkness, "Still here?" The night is unusually still. No coughs from nearby windows, no restless oxen, just a cricket chirping, like it's auditioning for the role of most optimistic insect. You can't sleep. Too quiet, too unhaunted. So you walk, not far, just out, down past Crumb Street. It's stuck. Past the mossy well, past the wall where someone's drawn that same blue bird again, only this time with tiny feet kicking out mid-flight. The moon is a silver coin above, drifting lazily, like even it has nothing left to rush toward. You think about everything, the masks, the vinegar, the rats, the prayers, the arguments, the cracked fingers, the numbness, the cartwheels rolling over stones slick with sorrow, and also the bread, the rain on your boots, the dumb chicken, the baby clapping for your terrible plague impersonation. You sit near the old chapel steps. The priest is inside, snoring through what is probably his fourth attempt at staying awake for midnight prayers. You lean back and look up. No omens, just stars. The same stars that blinked while the plague raged, while you stood in doorways delivering news no one wanted, while mothers wept and fathers carried bodies to pits and said nothing at all. And yet, here they are, still blinking, still indifferent, still beautiful. Mainstream historical fact. The post-plague period saw massive social restructuring. Labor shortages shifted power dynamics. Peasants bargained harder. Survivors found new mobility. Guilds reformed. And in some regions, even the seeds of early public health systems were sown. The world did change, but slowly, stubbornly, in crooked lines rather than straight paths. You close your eyes and let the breeze press against your skin, and then soft footsteps. Lisette, she doesn't speak. She just sits, hands you a sliver of dried pear. You chew it slowly. It tastes like sugar and dust. After a long silence, she murmurs, "Do you ever miss it?" You turn. The plague? No, I mean the urgency, the knowing what mattered, every second, every heartbeat, like it all counted. You nod. Sometimes, but I also like being bored. She smiles. Yeah, bored is underrated. You sit like that for a while until even the cricket gives up and silence returns. Quirky tidbit. There are unverified but persistent rumors that some former plague doctors went on to become poets, artists, even jesters. After seeing so much death, some survivors leaned hard into beauty, levity, and art, as if daring the world to be joyful again. You think about what you'll do tomorrow. You think about painting the inside of your home something other than sad beige. You think about maybe kissing Lisette, or maybe not. Maybe just handing her a better pair next time. You think about writing down everything that happened, not as a record, but as a story, a bedtime story for the future. Historians still argue whether those who lived through the plague ever fully recovered, whether the trauma echoed through generations or quietly melted into everyday survival. You decide it doesn't matter. You're not a symbol, you're a person, with a splinter in your thumb, a song stuck in your head, and a goat that still thinks your doorframe is a snack. You stand up. Lisette follows. You both walk home slowly, side by side, past lanterns that flicker softly on windowsills. Back to your street, your door. That chalk heart is still there. This time, you smile at it. You go inside. You light a small lamp. You pour a little broth. You write. The plague took nearly everything, but I am still here, and this tiny, tired, ridiculous life is mine. You stretch. You lie down. You listen to the distant whistle of someone starting to bake. And for the first time in what feels like centuries, you sleep, and now, with the world outside quieting and your heartbeat no longer galloping, let's let everything soften. Feel your eyes relax, the way a shutter slowly closes after the last light fades from a room. Breathe in, slowly. Let your chest lift, not with effort, but like a page fluttering open in the breeze. And breathe out, letting go of anything still clinging. Let the echoes of plague carts, vinegar masks, and whispered prayers slide into the background, where they belong. Because even in the darkest chapters of history, there were always candles burning somewhere, A hand on a shoulder, a child learning to dance again, a laugh that slipped through the cracks. Picture yourself now in a quieter time, a safer one, in a small creaky home with thick stone walls and a fireplace casting gentle shadows. Outside, the moon hangs low and soft over a sleeping village wrapped in mist. Inside, your blanket is warm, your bones are heavy, and tomorrow holds nothing urgent. Just the rustle of leaves, the smell of bread, and the long, slow rebuilding of things worth keeping. You've survived the unthinkable, and you didn't just survive. You lived. So now, let your thoughts dim like a lantern turned low. Let your breath guide you to that secret place behind your eyes, where dreams begin. You're safe here. You're warm. And the world, for all its brokenness, is still full of stories. Sleep well, weary traveler. We'll journey again soon. End of script. Sweet dreams.